Yeah. 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 So many lies that you hear from the net, they don't get her respect. She reporting the truth, not a check. You want an unbiased opinion straight from the chest, not a bit of accomplice or someone here for a check. Tune in, these are thoughts from a lawyer on a mission who goes so hard it's like she works on commission. Trolls in the comments might say she tripping cause they lack the knowledge, they don't know they missing. Got a couple current events that you like, wanna know about law from the eyes. Tired of all these blogs running lies because their agendas are disguised. Tune in to the intellect, cause I'm sure y'all missing all the facts of the case that she steady is gifting. Someone here for the people, man, it's so uplifting. If you ain't subscribed yet, then you just omitting facts.
Hello, everyone. It is Pam Esquire, also known as Your Law Intellect. I hope you guys are having a fantabulous Monday. Thank you all for joining me. If you could be so kind as to hit the like button on your way in. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. It is good to see each and every one of you. I'm a little behind on my content, okay? I'm a little behind because I have been ridiculously busy. But when I woke up from my good after deposition nap, I said we are going to go live and make sure we get caught up on the TD Jakes case, okay? Because if I don't hurry up, this case might end up out of here or something, and I haven't even went through the document. So that's what I plan on doing today. I know a lot of things have happened. I post periodically within the membership. So if you are a member, then you will get certain documents for Diddy. And I think the judge, Christina Peterson, I posted something about her. I posted the Tasha K when the dismissal happened, where Cardi B withdrew her request to try to dismiss the bankruptcy for Tasha K. Tasha K had a good day today in court. Apparently, she was able to get her plan approved, and so she's come to some agreement. So hopefully, she'll be moving onward and upward when it comes to this whole Cardi B situation. But those type of things, the situation with Busby being barred or not barred, and all of that, I posted in the membership. Just to let you guys know, I am keeping up with what's going on. I'm just like ridiculously busy. So if you guys, again, go ahead, hit that like button, hit the like button so we can get up in this algorithm. I'm going to give it a few more minutes because I don't want to, I don't labor long. I'm going to speak to a few of you guys as you come in. Let me post this on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, please consider doing that as well. Pam ESQ, that's me over on Instagram. I'm also on Tick and the Talk, even though I don't post very often, but go follow me anyway. I might do a clip here or there, depending on how I feel. Andrew said, dude made a very bad mistake pursuing this case against Youngblood. He would have came out better pretending he never heard about it. It's called the Streisand effect. I mean, he being TD Jakes had to make the decision on whether he felt this was good for him from a PR standpoint. And I guess between him and his team, they thought it was a good idea. But the Streisand effect, I've talked about it a lot, is when you make things bigger because you have a bigger audience and a bigger platform, or you're someone who people would want to obviously follow your life because you're a public figure. And so we start looking into it more when, after these interviews that occurred on Larry Reid's show, we probably would have stopped talking about this a long time ago. Let's just be real. So I agree, but we are where we are, You said, since we're talking about men of the cloth, the cussing pastor went on to glory. I saw that, CCB. Rest in peace to the cussing pastor. I saw a video of the cussing pastor like a week ago, and he wasn't looking too good. So I can't say I was shocked, because the videos they were showing of him, he was looking terrible. He was really looking terrible. And then his wife, she came out with a video basically telling all his business a month prior to it, or a couple months ago, and she mentioned his health before we even saw this play out, where he was on video where he was in the rehab or wherever he was staying at, some type of like nursing home type setting, skilled care, and he was looking bad, still cussing, still explaining why some picture of him with an adult toy after he talks about people all the time was, in a compromising position. He still came out to explain that while he up there trying to fight for his life. He still came out to explain to social media, that he ain't, listen, I ain't about to deny it, since he was on, picture caught on camera. But yep, the cussing pastor went on to glory. I heard there's a recent phone call between Nestor and Sonya that we need to talk about. Well, what phone call is that? You have to tell me which one it is, because it's a lot. I may do it on the other platform, because I usually don't really do phone calls, and I haven't been on the other platform over there where the hood and ghetto is, because that's how I look at a lot of these calls. The love after lockup calls. So I do that over there. Andrea says she was begging folks to stop bringing him sodas and lemonade and snacks. Folks were literally going up to the hospital slipping him stuff. Well, I guess we'll see what happens if they're gonna be doing a GoFundMe, or if he got a policy or whatever. We'll see what the saga brings from him passing away. So we'll see. Yeah, pretty much. That's it. Caramel, I wasn't trying to say that on here because they try to censor you and stuff. But yeah. So I hadn't talked about any of the follow-ups and all of that with the Jakes situation. For those of you that don't know, Bishop T.D. Jakes is one of the most prolific pastors, bishops, evangelists of this generation. And he is an author. He is an award winner. He is a movie producer. And he is the founder of the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. Well, a few months ago, back in about November-ish, Larry Reed Live did an interview with a man named Youngblood. Duane Youngblood, to be specific. And Youngblood was telling his story. It was called From the Abused to the Abuser. And he told the story about how he suffered a lot of sexual experiences and inappropriateness and violations while he was growing up in the church and in his ministry and getting into his ministerial positions and all of that. Well, part of that interview, for a good 10 minutes, he mentioned that T.D. Jakes alleges that T.D. Jakes attempted to kiss him. Okay, attempted to kiss him. He pushed him away. T.D. Jakes said no, and he sued him. So he sued him for one count of defamation, and there was another count for conspiracy, because what he is alleging is that because Youngblood's attorney sent him, being T.D. Jakes, a demand letter requesting payment, because I guess Youngblood was going to file a lawsuit. So for those of you that don't know, oftentimes when you are a plaintiff's civil litigator, before you file lawsuits, you send a demand and you give them the opportunity. And that's for whether you're famous or not famous. It does have anything to do with your status. You give them the opportunity to avoid litigation, because it can get costly on both sides. And yes, it may be more, I guess, attractive to public figures, because they have a reputation and a brand. However, this is something that we do whether anybody has ever heard of you a day in their life or whether you are to a status of a Michael Jackson. Okay, that's just the protocol. So apparently, Duane was going to bring a lawsuit at some point, or said he was going to bring a lawsuit against Jakes for this, how this abuse affected him, alleged interaction. I'm not going to say abuse, I'm going to say this alleged interaction, how it affected his life. And if you listen to the actual interview, what he was saying was he had already been through some levels of abuse. So apparently, when he was younger, he was at some competition. And at this competition, he was violated. He gave different instances of his household and his sister and just what he was exposed to, and all these bishops and all of this that occurred. And so when he got to Jake's, he thought he had finally found someone who basically wouldn't be like what he had experienced. And so he painted this picture as if because of Jake's, it just really depleted him because he was the person that he thought was going to be different than what he had experienced. So after he had done this interview, Jermaine Jakes, who is one of the older sons of TD Jakes, I think the second eldest, he inboxed Youngblood and he basically said, "This ain't what you want to do." I'm just paraphrasing. According to Youngblood, he felt that that was a threat. So because he thought that that was a threat, he contacted an attorney. So this is how his interaction, I guess, with his attorney happened, because he's like, "Yo, I did this interview. I said I was going to do a part 3, but this now I'm getting these inboxes." And so once Jakes got that $6 million demand, instead of responding like I would have responded, I probably would have responded, "Kiss my," but I would have said it in legal terms. You know what I'm saying? You can respond to him and say, "Thank you so much, but respectfully kick rocks." You know what I'm saying? Like, that's probably because you get offers that may be insulting on both ends. He may feel like it's worth $1 quadrillion. I feel like it's worth whatever. I'm going to tell you, I'm not giving you nothing. That would have been my response. It's been times that people have offered me money for my clients, and I told them, "Not, that's never going to happen. That's insulting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file a lawsuit in response." So apparently Jakes decided not to respond to the demand letter, but he decided to file a lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, he alleged defamation, he alleged conspiracy, and the conspiracy is that because of this $6 million, I guess people were going to divvy it out. He doesn't know who all the people are because he said they're those, but he believes this is some type of takedown of his reputation. And so we went over a lot of different documents that were filed before we get to the anti-slap that Youngblood responded and did basically a motion to dismiss the case. Again, I didn't even go over the motion to dismiss the case because I was busy when all of that stuff happened. So his motion to dismiss, he's basically saying this is a way for him to silence him. This is a way for Jakes to silence him by filing this lawsuit. And so for those of you that don't know, that is the purpose of the anti-slap. The anti-slap is not in every state, and in fact, it was just became effective in Pennsylvania in July of 2024. So every state doesn't even have it, but the purpose is that if you get these type of lawsuits from people that got pockets, then this is a way, if they're trying to quell your speech, this is a way that you can try to get rid of the case without coming out of a bunch of money, because you're able to show that this case should be dismissed at this juncture. So what Youngblood did, this is do I got his motion up? Because this stuff is so old. Let me see if this is. No, that's Jake's house or a building. Let me see if I could find his original anti-slap. I'm only going to point out parts of it because a lot of the stuff you guys have heard on other platforms. Thais has talked about this. I've been on his platform talking about it, but I've just never talked about it over here. So for the sake of completion, of course, you guys know I got to talk about it over here. So he filed the special motion to dismiss, and I'm just going to read the introduction and do some highlights. So this was Youngblood's motion to dismiss. So he says, this court is tasked with addressing one of the most egregious attempts to pervert the judicial process for personal gain. Plaintiff Thomas Dexter T.D. Jakes, a self-proclaimed spiritual leader revered by millions, has weaponized this lawsuit not to seek justice, but to muzzle the voice of truth. His hypocrisy is staggering, standing on the pulpit on Sundays to preach virtue while allegedly engaging in depraved acts and betraying the principles he claims to uphold. As scripture warns, quote, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. And that's Matthew 7:15 for all you Bible scholars out there. Plaintiff epitomizes this warning, using his platform to project an image of righteousness while allegedly abusing his power to satisfy his closeted homosexual desires. Defendant Duane Youngblood, a survivor of clergy abuse and an advocate for transparency, stands accused of defamation and other baseless claims for daring to speak his truth. However, the defendant's narrative is not one of vengeance, it is one of redemption and accountability. By no means is defendant a patron saint. Because for those of you that don't know, and it's going to go into extensively when Jakes responds, is that Youngblood is a convicted ex-offender, and he's done a nice amount of time in prison for it, and he is also on the registry. So he says, by no means defendant, he's not a patron saint. He has admittedly done things in his past that he is ashamed of, and after he has served his time, he is focused on publicly atoning for his actions. The defendant is trying to shed light on systematic abuse within religious institutions. His statements grounded, his statements grounded in lived experience and supported by corroborating affidavit testimony are the very type of protected speech Pennsylvania anti-SLAPP statute seeks to preserve. So the motion seeks to dismiss the claim, plaintiff's retaliatory complaint. Oh, he got another scripture in here for you Bible people. The Bible rebukes said duplicity. Quote, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name, end quote. And that's over in Exodus chapter 20, verse 7. Plaintiff's actions represent an affront to this commandment, exploiting the sanctity of faith to shield his misconduct. By granting this motion, this court will affirm the principles of free speech and justice while ensuring that those who abuse their position of power are held accountable. Okay, so within his motion to dismiss or under the pursuant to the anti-SLAPP, there were sworn affidavits from a Jeffrey S. Gray, a Richard Edwin, and there was Richard Edwin Youngblood, that's his brother. And so they basically talked about how Duane Youngblood confided in them and told them the exact same story that was told on the Larry Live platform a while ago. So that's pretty much what their affidavit entailed. But Richard also gave his own account of what he alleges that he had his own personal experience with T.D. Jakes. We're going to get into that in just 1 second. But I just want to briefly let you guys know. So first he goes over the legal standard for the anti-SLAPP. And that's going to come into play when we do another one of these briefs, because I'm going to have to explain the anti-SLAPP because everybody is all over the place with it. He did say he was defamation proof. I don't necessarily agree with that argument, because when they say, they call it libel proof is what I've heard it being coined as. And that's basically where your past is so jacked up as far as like criminal record of the same thing that you really shouldn't be trying to come at anybody for coming at you, because you already have a messed up reputation. Like, for instance, when I talked about Whitehead and his past and how he had already had issues and went to prison for scamming. So people calling you a scammer, it's like, why are you, when it comes to scamming and stealing, you're libel proof because you've done it enough where now it's on record that this is what it is. So we can't defame a name that's already jacked up. It's pretty much what it's saying. So I don't necessarily believe in this, that TD Jakes would be, because a lot of stuff with TD Jakes has been speculation. With the Diddy situation, we've never been able to really prove anything that had to do with the Diddy. There's, there were pictures. A lot of the other stuff was AI, deep fake AI, because he sued YouTube, and he's suing a whole lot of people over in California trying to figure out who made up these videos of these AI people. So we've never really had anything big to prove that anything outside of rumors and stuff were that. He's never been convicted of anything. So I wouldn't necessarily went that route, but hey, when you writing motions, you throw what's in there and let the judge say it doesn't apply. So that was his first argument. He got so many scripts. This was like Bible study in this pleading. I didn't really read this. He got, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but a companion of fools will suffer harm. That's Proverbs 13:20. Y'all didn't know you was getting Bible study today. A man is known by the company he keeps, and not surprisingly, plaintiff keeps company with indicted RICO ex-offender trafficker Sean Combs, and alleged actually assaulting members of the clergy. And he got Eddie Long. I ain't never heard nothing about Kenneth Copeland and Rick Warren. I don't know who that is, but I had never heard anything about Kenneth. But he put those in parentheses, so that's allegedly. So he's saying these your homeboys, and the fruit don't fall too far from the tree. All right. So his argument is basically that his statements are protected as a public expression, because that's what the anti-SLAPP provides. And then and then of course Jakes is a public figure, which means that he has to not only prove the different elements of defamation, but he also has to prove that it was done with malice, because he is a public figure and he has to prove falsity as well, that the claims are false. And so he is arguing, obviously, he's saying that truth is a defense to defamation, which it is. So he's saying his statement is true. He's saying he's a public figure, so he can't prove that it was done in any type of malicious way, and he can't prove that it's false. So those are like the crux of his arguments for the defamation. He also notes that it's a matter of public concern, because this is speech involving public figures and institutions addressing societal or systematic issues is accorded the highest level of First Amendment protection. And so in Pennsylvania specifically, apparently there was a widespread investigation related to all the issues that were happening in the Catholic Church. And so Youngblood goes into detail about that when he says Pennsylvania spearheaded the national practice of holding clergymen accountable. So this is something that will be of public concern if you have a person who is a bishop and a public figure who is allegedly engaged in this. So people would be concerned. As you can tell, we're concerned because we're all talking about it on our YouTube channels. So he's saying for those reasons, this case should be dismissed. Oh, he also said there's no evidence of reputational harm. So he hasn't shown that it has affected his reputation. But then the second claim was civil conspiracy. And in order to state a claim for civil conspiracy, you have to allege a combination of two or more persons to do a criminal act or do a lawful act by unlawful means or for an unlawful purpose. And the plaintiff must make specific factual allegations of a combination of agreement or understanding among all or between any of the defendants to plot, plan, or conspire to carry out the alleged chain of events. So basically, he's saying he has not proven any of these that you have to prove in order for a conspiracy, which I would agree with. And the judge mentioned that in one of the documents that the judge put up as well, was there's no, all of it's speculation. They're speculating that this $6 million demand, which lawyers do demands all the time, was somehow orchestrated with Larry Reed, and he was going to get a piece of it somehow, and all of this is to extort money. But there was a motion where they were trying to expedite discovery to get to subpoena Larry Reed so they can prove their speculative statements. And in order to prove a civil conspiracy, you're not supposed to speculate. Like, you're supposed to have information that you can, factual information that there was some type of agreement, and in order to do this conspiracy that you are alleging. So there's no evidence of an unlawful agreement, and failure to demonstrate legal harm. And then he asked for attorney fees. So again, this is the Cliff Notes, honey, because I know some of y'all have seen this already. But that is it. Let me see if you guys have any questions related to this first document. I am going to pull up what Richard Youngblood alleges. We're going to go over that next. Why did T.D. Jakes file it in Pennsylvania? Because that's where Youngblood resides. So, yeah. You said, did Rick Warren write A Purpose-Driven Life? Maybe, did he? Maybe he did. I don't know. Tracy, you just got your I know YouTube plays me, but it's okay. I'm going to do better. I'm going to come on more so people can get their notification. Hey, Theodore, good to see you. You said, did you say Bible study? I'm here for it. Not really Grace, Mercy, and Save. Like, this really is not Bible study, but they were putting a lot of scriptures in there. So if you were looking and searching for some scriptures for you to study on tonight, I just gave you a few, but no. And this is far from Bible study. Yeah, no. You know what? It's that peach cobbler gate. All right, y'all ready? You guys ready for what Richard has to say? Richard had a lot to say. Richard is so what we did know is after the second interview with Larry Reed, he was going to do a third interview, I guess, and Youngblood had more to say, but he also was going to come on with his brother, Richard Youngblood. Of course, this lawsuit, I guess it kind of stopped all that from happening because now they're dealing with this lawsuit. However, Richard Youngblood did his own affidavit. Let me see, which one is that? Guys, keep hitting that like button so folks will get their notification. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, we got the cam scanner. Okay. This is the sworn affidavit from Richard Youngblood, and he basically says that his brother told him everything that he said on the platform, but then he talks about his personal experience. So this is, guys, listen up, pull up your chair so you can hear me clearly. My personal experience with Bishop T.D. Jakes is as follows. On or about the spring of 1986, I was a young minister who was hungering after God. I was in the midst of a personal time of prayer and fasting concerning my desire for someone to help me reach my full potential. I remember praying these words, quote, Lord, I feel like Joshua. I need a Moses in my life, end quote. They so dramatic. These preachers, man. These preachers cannot talk regular, even in the affidavit. It was at this time that my father tells me about Elder T.D. Jakes, who was the guest speaker at the Refuge Temple Church in Penn Hills, Pennsylvania. The pastor at that time was Elder Rawlings. This week long event began every night at around 8 p.m. I decided to attend to see if what my father had to say was true. To my amazement, he was absolutely correct in my opinion. Elder Jakes had a powerful and revelatory way in which he preached. I remember thinking that his ability to put into words many of the things that I thought but could not articulate. He is a great orator. I attended each night being encouraged both by his preaching style and his perspective on the scriptures. On one of the nights of this revival, Jakes mentioned that he would be heading home to West Virginia for the weekend to his home church and returning to Pittsburgh to another church the following week. Following one of the services that week, I asked Elder Jakes if I could drive him to his church in West Virginia since he was returning the following week. To my shock, he said yes. That weekend, I was a guest in his home where I met his wife and their two sons. That Sunday, we went to a town called Smithers, where the Temple of Faith resided. Elder Jakes told me that it was a former theater that had been condemned. They purchased it and were renovating it. The church service that Sunday was another phenomenal experience. The following day, we headed back to Pittsburgh for his second week of services. On the drive back, Elder Jakes says to me, Brother Youngblood, I've got some good brothers at my church, but in many ways, I feel like Moses looking for Joshua. This statement sounded like a direct answer to the prayer I had prayed just days ago. I took this as a sign that I had found the right person to help me reach my potential in ministry. I had a later conversation with him where I let him know of my intentions to relocate to West Virginia so that I could sit under his tutelage. At that time, I was a husband and father. So I had to share all this with my wife and family. My wife offers no resistance to my desire to relocate. We packed our house and all our belongings and moved to Charleston, West Virginia. We pulled up in front of Elder Jake's house, following what I believe was going to be the best move of my life in young ministry. As I began to integrate myself into the Temple of Faith, I am given responsibilities to both the church as well as to Elder Jake's and family. I'm eventually giving the responsibility as his armor bearer. In position, I assisted him with a variety of things such as driving, carrying the items he needed for preaching, i.e., his Bible or robe, traveling with him as my schedule allowed to other cities, as well as being available throughout the day if he needed my assistance in some matter. It was during this time that I also became the praise and worship leader. All of this happened within a 2 year period of time. During this time, my wife and I have our son. He was born in June of 87. This is my landmark of when things started to become weird. The conversation Jake started to have with me had shifted from ministry and God to more things about him. He shared an uncomfortable story about how he taught his wife to have oral with him. There were other uncomfortable things he said, which I tried very hard to put into perspective so that it would make sense for me. He continued his travels around the country, some without me and others when I accompanied him. I recall one trip to a city called Ligo in West Virginia. He told me that it was a church that handles snakes, but they had agreed not to handle them on this particular Sunday. We joked about where we would have run if they had brought them out. This was just one of the many trips and conversations we had to this point at this point. At this time, the Temple of Faith was a part of a larger organization named Greater Emmanuel Apostolic Faith Tabernacle, Inc. These names are very long. Elder Jakes had been promoted to the national evangelist, which required travel to the other churches in the fellowship. In 1988, Elder Jakes is made a bishop. He shared with me a conversation that he had with the then chief apostle on how not only make him a bishop, but to make him head of the diocese by moving the two men ahead of him out of the way. So he is now a bishop with greater responsibilities, greater authority, and greater respect. During that year, there is a mandatory meeting that he had to attend in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He asked me to accompany him as his driver, which was I was happy to do because I would get the opportunity to visit with my parents and siblings. He decided that we would head there a day early, which meant we had to get a hotel for the night. Maybe I should put up the trigger warning because I think this is where his allegations are. I don't know why they are doing these affidavits like books. I really don't. I really don't know why these affidavits are starting to look like books. This is just a lot. What happened to paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3? Because this sounds like testimony you would probably give at a deposition, but nonetheless, you guys ready? He decided that we would head there a day early, which meant we had to get a hotel for the night. We stopped at what I believe was an Econo Lodge in Westover, West Virginia. He secured a room with 2 beds in it, and we went into the room for the night. That night, while I was laying in my bed, I felt Elder Jakes climb into my bed. He pressed his body against mine and asked, "Youngblood, do you feel that?" He was referencing his erection and he was pressing against my backside. I got up out of the bed in complete shock as he also got up from the opposite side and met me. He grabbed me by my arms and pulled me to him and started trying to kiss me. At this point, I cannot believe what is happening to me. I had moved my family following this man around the country, and in this hotel I am being introduced to what amounted to a groomer. I thought about everything he had said or done, and now it started looking like a plot. I was somehow able to make it through the night with no further interaction along that line. And the following day, we continued our trip to Pittsburgh. On our way back after the meeting, I brought up what happened and expressed my extreme discomfort and that I loved my wife. His response was a slight grunt, something like, to which I asked what that meant. And he responded that it kind of hurt his feelings to hear me say that. I am now more confused than ever about what I have gotten myself and my family into. The following week at church, I am not the same. The life changing event in that hotel in Westover had left me trying to make sense of things. I decided to share what happened in that hotel with one of the elders in the church named Silas Wheeler. I told him everything that happened in that Econo Lodge in Westover, West Virginia. I was looking for someone to help me make sense of this, but I would find out that Silas was not that person. He immediately went to Bishop Jakes and told him what I had shared. Jake subsequently called me into his office where he berates me for sharing what happened. He says, quote, "It was like Willa was in the hotel with the camera." He then says, "You didn't care about your wife," to suggest she may find out his secret. At this point, oh, my wife, I'm sorry. "You didn't care about my wife," to suggest she may find out his secret. At this point, I am not only confused, but I feel betrayed by Silas. There was one other minister who shared a duplex with us that I felt close to, so I decided to ask him if Jakes had ever tried anything actually with him, to which he responded, quote, "I've never been woke up with nothing like that." He was like, "Bro, you on your own." This began the internal conversation within me concerning what I must have done to make Bishop Jakes think that I was GAY. Eventually, he told me that I could no longer attend his church, called my wife, told her that I was a liar and to beware of me, and also that even though I was no longer allowed to attend the church, she could. I called him after being told this from my wife and shared some choice words. He basically cussed out the bishop or the elder. He wasn't a bishop then. Sound like he cussed the elder out. From that day until recent years, I have had mental and spiritual anguish as I was left to bear such a burden as the secret of Jake's sexuality and the way in which I found out. It's been 39 years of my life, my now ex-wife, and our children, products of a broken home and our faith crushed to pieces, all because I simply wanted someone to help me become my best self. I was totally and completely deceived by Thomas Dexter Jakes. So that is from Richard Youngblood. That was one of the affidavits. There were two other affidavits in support, again by individuals that say, yeah, he told me these same stories. Okay, so that was that's the summary of the motion to dismiss pursuant to the anti-SLAPP. Any questions before we get on to Jake's response? Because Jake's went hard in the paint in his response. Okay, he was going after everybody. If you stole a piece of candy in kindergarten, Jake's investigator found out. That's how that response is looking. My only question is, when did the two brothers share their stories? We're gonna get into that, Tabitha, because I've done a little research. Okay, we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into some of this making up these. I mean, when these stories, I ain't gonna say making up the story, but when these stories kind of started coming out, somewhat anyway. You know what? Oh my goodness, Lord. Wasn't there a man that confirmed that he and Richard? Okay, there's another affidavit. We ain't getting there yet, Andrew. I'm listen, we gotta get to it, all right? I'm trying to go as fast as I can. We late. You know, I would have done all of these in different lives, but I'm so late covering this. I can't do it. Okay, let me see. Where is Jake's? Let me see. Okay, let's see Jake's response to this motion. So Jake's did an opposition, of course, and he said, the introduction is in August of 2024, defendant Duane Youngblood left Pennsylvania State Prison after serving almost 10 years for exploiting his position as a clergyman to actually abuse minors. So y'all see where this is going, right? Y'all see how this is going? It's about this prestigious, pristine, squeaky clean man versus the man who just left state prison. So we're attacking the person. We're attacking the character. It's a whole lot of attacking character in this response. Within 2 months of his release, Youngblood found himself on a YouTube podcast run by a longtime critic of plaintiff T.D. Jakes. There, he minimized his own conduct and cast blame onto Bishop Jakes, claiming that he assaulted Youngblood in June of '86 by cornering him, preventing him from leaving, and attempting to involuntarily kiss the teenage Youngblood. He also claimed that Bishop Jakes called the next day and offered to support him for life in exchange for actual favors. That is all a lie. The tale reflects an ex-con's effort to take advantage of Bishop Jakes, who had met Youngblood and his family through their involvement in the same Rust Belt church network, but of course never assaulted him, to deflect the blame from his own heinous conduct, to extort millions, and to launch a new chapter in his career along with his co-conspirators. Indeed, after his podcast appearances, Youngblood hired a publicist, launched a website, announced a new book, and created a life coaching and public speaking business. He also hired a lawyer, Tyrone Blackburn, to send a letter to Bishop Jakes demanding $6 million or else he would file unspecified claims against him and his church. Instead, Bishop Jakes filed this lawsuit. Youngblood now attempts to avoid accountability yet again, this time by invoking Pennsylvania anti-SLAPP law, necessary portions of which have not yet gone into effect, and misrepresenting its text and listing felons and family members to submit flawed affidavits, and by lobbying more lies, all to distract from the issues. Those efforts fail as a matter of law and fact. Bishop Jakes believes in the power of forgiveness and always tries to turn the other cheek. But this is too much for anyone to bear. Bishop Jakes should be allowed to hold Youngblood and his co-conspirators accountable for their lies, and Youngblood's motion and any attempt to attack the Jakes family with more false allegations should be rejected. So look how they describe Jakes though. Bishop T.D. Jakes is one of the most prominent and respected spiritual leaders in the United States today. He is the founder and senior pastor of the Potter's House Church in Dallas, Texas, which has a global reach and a congregation exceeding 80,000 persons. He has authored 30 books, produces faith-focused music and films, and has even won a Grammy. But that wasn't always so. Bishop Jakes grew up in a small town in West Virginia and began preaching part-time in 1980, founding a small church with just 10 parishioners while working at a chemical plant to support himself and his family. After the plant closed in 82, Bishop Jakes spent the rest of the 1980s building a church while struggling to make ends meet, digging ditches at night. After meeting prominent evangelical Carlton Pearson and speaking at the 1993 Azusa Evangelical Conference, that Bishop Jakes first gained some recognition, which later grew into the Potter's House and national acclaim. So then he goes on, y'all, and just talks about Duane Youngblood and gets into the facts of the minors with Duane Youngblood. So that is in part B. We talked about that ad nauseum. We understand. He's talked about it in every document. So then he says, Duane Youngblood concocts a plan with the help of others to falsely accuse Bishop Jakes of misconduct. Beginning in October 2024, Youngblood and John Doe's 1 through 10 worked together to launch knowingly false and defamatory attacks on Bishop Jakes and accuse him of actually assaulting a teenage Youngblood in a Pittsburgh area home. On October 28th and November 3rd, Youngblood appeared on the Larry Reid Live YouTube show, where he claimed that when he was a teenager on or around June 9th, Bishop Jakes cornered him, prevented him from exiting the room, hugged him, and tried to kiss him without Youngblood's consent. Youngblood added to his false story by claiming that the next day Bishop Jakes called him and told him that if Youngblood would be his guy in Pittsburgh, who he could have sex with whenever he visited, he would take care of Youngblood for the rest of his life. All right. And so he's saying the claims are all completely fabricated. Bishop Jakes never tried to corner, grab, or kiss any teenager during his visits to Pittsburgh, and he certainly did not phone Youngblood to proposition him for X in exchange for financial support. He never apologized for doing so because he didn't happen, as Youngblood very well knows. And the stories make no sense because, as explained above, in 1986, Bishop Jakes was a small town preacher who could barely support his own family, let alone another person in another city. So he's basically alleging that he does show his house and his church from around that time. Let's pull it up. Let's pull up the house. Let me see. What's that? Not the house. That's the church. So he was letting y'all know he was too broke around this time. Okay, that's the church. Let's see if I got his house. I don't think I pulled his house up. Yeah, I don't think I pulled his house up. But so that's the church, and he's basically saying, I was, why would I tell someone I'm going to take care of them and I couldn't take care of my own family? That's what he's saying. So let's go on. So that's his storefront there. All right. Youngblood's motivation for making up these stories became clear shortly after. On November 9th, just 6 days after his second LRL interview, Youngblood purchased the rights to DuaneYoungblood.com and created a launching soon placeholder webpage. Jakes is scouring this here internet. He got people, forensic folks, because they did an affidavit when they downloaded the video. They are trying to find whatever they can related to Youngblood and to try to create a motive as to why Youngblood did this interview. So, and looking at the interview and looking at the internet, apparently he has a web page that he said he was going to launch soon, and he's supposed to be writing books. I know he's written books in the past. You can look those up as well. So he has written books in the past. But yeah, he's saying that this was the reason. He's trying to like reinvent himself and change the narrative on what he went to prison for and reinvent himself to something as being an abused person. And this is why he ended up being an abuser. And now he's turning this to some type of business. So that's essentially what he is arguing. And the website, I guess he done put on there the interviews with Larry Reed and all of that on his website as well. So you can click on the website according to him. I have not looked at it, but that's what he is alleging. So let's go to the Youngblood enlists convicted felons and family members to submit bogus affidavits. So again, I told you there were affidavits submitted where they say, yeah, he told me that, and this was prior, obviously years prior to him going on LRL. He told me that this happened. This isn't a story he just made up. So what they did was they did these extensive background checks on everybody. So the Joshua Munez, who said, yes, he did tell me about this, they say, oh, he omitted from the affidavit that he was convicted of child X abuse crimes, is a registered ex-offender, and that Youngblood was in prison when he allegedly told him about Bishop Jakes over breakfast. I'm not understanding why that would be important in the affidavit. So what they did was they're trying to let the court know who these people are. However, at this stage, the court is not supposed to weigh credibility. But this is what this is turned into. It's all about credibility and who you gonna believe, them, these criminals, or you gonna believe this magnificent, great person over here. So then you got Landon Claiborne, who also said, yeah, he told me about this as well. They said he is also a convicted felon who served 41 months for heroin distribution, but omitted that fact from the affidavit. Why would he put in the affidavit, oh yeah, by the way, I did 41 months for heroin? That don't make any sense. Then LaShawn Youngblood, they said the story about her husband telling her about Bishop Jakes a few years before the spring of 2015 is directly contradicted by her and her husband's prior statements in the court in 2014, 2015. So what they did was they also attached transcripts from when Youngblood was in court. They went to the sentencing transcripts and they're trying to find what did he say in there. He never mentioned Jakes at that point that he was a part of anything or whatnot. So then they talk about Jeffrey Gray. Jeffrey Gray, they're saying he did not work for Merrill Lynch in 1992 when he claims Youngblood told him about Bishop Jakes. So he said in the affidavit that Jeffrey Gray said that he was working at the time. He believed he was working at Merrill Lynch. And he said when he told him this. So they're picking that apart, saying he wasn't even working at Merrill. So they did a background check to see when this man was working at Merrill Lynch. Then Daniel Spalding, they says stories about Youngblood telling him about Bishop Jakes would have taken place right after his arrest and first charge for actually assaulting a minor he was counseling. So they didn't really have much on him, I guess. So they just said the time that Youngblood said it was taken right before Youngblood's arrest and first charge for actually assaulting a minor. So this was before so he's basically saying, I guess this man was told this before Youngblood even had gotten arrested for the first time. So, and then Richard Youngblood, they're saying his entire story, both his own tale and his brother sharing his, are belied by Richard's own history of vindictiveness against Bishop Jakes, including the fact that Richard began plotting against Bishop Jakes in 2008 when Bishop did not speak up for Duane at his first criminal sentencing hearing, and that within the last 10 years, Richard was has begged for a job and assistance, which Bishop Jakes rejected. I got something I'm going to put up about that. Now, the attorney Potch is the one, I guess, who claims that he went on a website, and on this website, somebody in the comments said, this is what it was in the affidavit. Somebody in the comments, I guess, they said they're the ones that gave this information about him wanting Bishop Jakes to speak up for Duane. He's been mad ever since. And I guess they said it in some comments under some post or whatever. And Jakes is the one in his affidavit that mentions about him asking for a job. So we'll pull up his affidavit too. But anyway, their argument is basically they're arguing that the anti-SLAPP doesn't even apply. I told you all the anti-SLAPP was just enacted. It became effective last July of 2024. But the way it is set up is you have the substantive portion of the statute, which is the law, which the legislature have authority to pass, and then you have the procedural. When you go to the procedural portion, the legislative, they can give a recommendation for a procedural. However, it's that state Supreme Court that decides whether they are going to accept the procedural portion of it or not. However, the substantive portion is enacted. It is the law portion of the anti-SLAPP is currently active, despite what they're saying in this document. It's the procedural portion that has not been approved, and it may never be by the Supreme Court. The way they just wanted to do a certain process, you get 60 days, and they wanted to kind of change the procedures in it. That hasn't been accepted by the Supreme Court yet, or validated by the Supreme Court. So that's what they're talking about. And it's the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania that will validate. They're the ones that in most states, I know even here in Michigan, it's the state Supreme Court that basically validates a draft and they approve our court rules. And so that's what they're talking about. So they're saying statutory issue. So then they're also saying, they're arguing that the anti-SLAPP, because it is a state enacted statute, doesn't apply in federal court. However, they are wrong. And how did Pam know that they're wrong is because the attorneys who are actually the attorneys, I believe they represent Tasha K on all of her defamation lawsuits. They were actually a part of drafting it, and they specifically made it so that it wouldn't conflict with federal law, so that it can be in state and federal law. So they're doing a whole analysis on what we call the Erie Doctrine, which we learned in law school, which was a pain. So I'm not going to put you through it, on how you know if a law can be applied in state and federal court. And the way this was drafted, because there were so many anti-SLAPPs already, there are some jurisdictions that only apply it in state court because the way it was drafted conflicts with federal court. Well, Pennsylvania drafted theirs specifically so that they can have it in federal court and state court. And there actually was what we call an amicus brief and another lawsuit where this attorney's firm was representing the ACLU and other media outlets. And they basically confirmed that when it was being decided and argued, it was being argued so that it can be applied in federal and state court. So that's basically what their argument is. They're trying to say that it doesn't apply. It should apply if the court follows. I don't know how extensively. I looked at Youngblood's reply. He didn't really extensively talk about the anti-SLAPP and why it should be applied in federal court. I would have put a little bit more time into that, but he did attach the amicus brief, which kind of broke it down. So if the court looks at that, he can see that. So that's what all of that is about. They trying to make it where he can't even use the anti-SLAPP at all. So then they say, well, even if the anti-SLAPP does apply, y'all hitting the like button because I'm doing some good teaching today, okay? Name Change said, do not forget to hit the like button and notification button for all content. Check out the members only. Yes, thank you, Name Change 412. I appreciate that. Did I bring something to drink in here? Shoot, I've been doing a whole lot of talking. It's been an hour. Okay, let me see. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you gifting The memberships. Thank you for the 10 membership. That is so kind of you. I appreciate that. A soft place to land. Been a member for 5 months. Thank you so much for your support. You said I just got the notification. I get that a lot. I'm in the middle of it, and then people are like, I just got the notification. But we're glad you're here. It's not going to be a quick live because I had to go over the stuff I hadn't gone over a few weeks ago when all of this transpired. So Tabitha said they threw Carlton Pearson's name in the mix to rub in Larry's face. Wow. You think so, Tabitha? You think that's what that was about? Ooh. He said the fact that you do all this is addition to your regular career is amazing. You just rattle through these laws like it's second nature. Thank you. Thank you so much for the compliment, E. I love my craft, and it definitely is a craft. It is a craft. Yeah. So there's that. All right. So let's go on. We're not gonna get too far off because I could talk to y'all for days and then we forget about what we here for. So then Jakes basically says, regardless, this lawsuit is not a slap. It's he's saying, irregardless, there's no merit anyway. No matter what the standard is, he's saying it's defamation per se. So these are the statements that he is saying is defamation per se. He said Youngblood's claims about Bishop Jakes. The first thing that Youngblood said they're saying is defamation is that when Youngblood was in his late teens, Bishop Jakes cornered him, wrapped his arms around him, and tried to kiss him in a way that Youngblood found threatening and predatory. In other words, sexual assault. So they're trying to say it's defamation per se because he's alleging sexual assault. The second one is afterwards, Jakes called him and said, there's 3 things I need you to do. The first one is when I come to Pittsburgh, you're going to be the only person I sleep with. The second one is you can't sleep with anybody else because I don't want to give my wife anything. And thirdly, I will take care of you for the rest of your life. He's saying that's defamation. That's the second statement. And the third defamatory statement is he saying, and that there is so much more to me and Bishop Jakes and my family and Bishop Jakes and the absolute destructive actual damage. So those are the statements. I'm telling you, it was literally a small segment of this interview. So I was wondering what all the statements they will pull. I can see the first one, them pulling that one, but these are the statements that they're saying are defamatory. So they're saying the gist of the lie is that Bishop Jakes groomed, actually abused, actually assaulted, and engaged in predatory conduct of an sexual nature. So that's what they're saying. The gist of it. Anybody is going to look at this and say that he engaged in some type of sexual assault, which is a crime. So then Jakes goes on and he says occasionally he traveled from his home in West Virginia and Pittsburgh to preach in the mid-'80s. None of the salient events Youngblood describes occurred. Bishop Jakes never tried to corner, grab, or kiss any teenagers during his trip, and he certainly did not call to proposition him for X in exchange for financial support. Bishop Jakes' denial satisfied his burden on falsehood, even under the highest possible standard. So he's trying to say all he has to do is deny it on his own in declaration, according to this California case. And that's enough for him to prove that it's false by just denying it for this stage. And while Youngblood offers countervailing declarations talking about with glaring omissions, contradiction, and inaccuracies, I would disagree with that. Some of that stuff is not omissions. It's like, why are you going to put in there, my name is so-and-so. I did 41 months for selling drugs. Like, who puts that in an affidavit? And 9 times out of 10, depending on when the time was, it doesn't have anything to do with dishonesty or lying or any of that you can try to use it to impeach him in court. So it's not even really relevant. But okay. Has nothing to do with that for dishonesty. And I don't know how long ago it was either, but nonetheless, it's really not relevant. But they're trying to make it seem like these affidavits have a lot of omissions in them because you didn't put certain things in there that they found when they were researching and doing background checks on these people, because they didn't put that in there about themselves and let the court know, then they're purposefully omitting something. So then they go in, basically they know that the court does not weigh credibility at this stage, but if they did, basically everybody lying. All these affidavits, these people ain't nothing but crooks, criminals, and liars. So they said, but if the court did weigh credibility, it should not credit anything Youngblood, a known liar, says. As one judge found during a 2015 probation violation hearing, he said, quote, Youngblood has lied and he has scammed and he has conned me from the day he stood in front of me, end quote. 7 years earlier, quote, I have been misled. I have been deceived. I have been actually lied to by Youngblood. So he's pulling up, I guess, quotes of judges that probably say this to a whole lot of people that stand before them, of Youngblood lying and not being honest, especially at probation violation hearing. And they pulled up the transcripts and they added those as an exhibit and said, this is proof that you can't believe nothing Youngblood said, because these judges quoted and said that he was a liar. And then he said at that same hearing, Youngblood testified about his own story of abuse, but he told the court that he'd been assaulted at the age of 12 in 1979 in a penthouse after he won a singing competition. That incident bears no resemblance to any of the 2024 allegations he made in LRL. Now, I have to look at that again, but I remember him saying he was assaulted at a competition. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I do recall him saying he was assaulted. I don't remember if it was a penthouse. I don't know where it was at, but I do remember that he said he was assaulted. You said Jake's lawyers, not Petty. Patty calling Jake's lawyers Petty. You know you petty when Patty calling you Petty. Hey, old man Johnson Swarm, good to see you. Yeah, he had a history of it before meeting Jake's. Yeah, he did say. I'm just saying. I just remember him mentioning the competition again. I was in and out of that interview. I kind of need to watch the whole thing, but yeah, you believe you heard that too, for always, forever. She said they pettier than me. Oh gosh. Despite having an incentive to discuss all abuse he suffered to explain his own ex crimes and mitigate his sentence, he did not mention Bishop Jakes or anything resembling his new accusation. So he's saying when he was going before the judge, he never told the judge, Bishop Jakes groomed me when I was or tried to kiss me and corner me, or any of these allegations. So I guess they're telling the court they should consider the fact that he didn't tell the court that when he was in front of them. So then he says, further undermining Youngblood's claims is the reality that in the mid-1980s, Bishop Jakes was a wealthy, globe-trotting preacher who could support Youngblood for life in exchange for actual favors whenever he came to Pittsburgh. Nor was his stock rising, such that he would have had X with anybody at that time. Rather, throughout the 1980s, Jakes lived in crushing poverty, having only become a full-time preacher in 82 after losing his job at a chemical plant which closed. He only began to experience modest success at the absolute earliest in 1992. Far from being able to support Youngblood, in 1986, Jakes was a humbled Rust Belt preacher who could barely afford to maintain a storefront church in rural West Virginia. The tales are ex post facto inventions full of anachronisms that reflect Bishop Jakes' post 93 success rather than the reality of the mid 80s. So then they say Youngblood's claims were made with actual malice. And they're saying the circumstances of this case vividly demonstrate that Youngblood knew he was lying about Bishop Jakes, but did so for money, fame, and even revenge. So let's see. This is what he's saying the actual malice is. Here, the evidence of malice paints a compelling picture. In August 2024, Youngblood completed a 9-year prison sentence and needed to build a new life. To that end, Youngblood initiated a plan to transform himself from an ex-offender into an inspiration, even enlisting a publicist to help. By October, he joined forces with wannabe spiritual leader Larry Reed. He be going after you, Larry. They called you a wannabe spiritual leader, Larry Reed, who regularly books guests who attack Bishop Jakes on LRL. Working with Reed, Youngblood told his news story that Bishop Jakes played a part in his abuse. The story was a gold mine for Youngblood, allowing him to appear on Reed's show, garnering attention for his business and recasting him as the victim rather than the minors he abused during counseling sessions. So this sounds like their theory. Because they're putting they basically hire somebody to go find whatever information they can find, and this is the theory they came up with, that this is the reason why he came up with this, because he wants to reinvent himself, and that he wants to get money off of Jakes. Youngblood's fabrications also furthered his brother Richard's vendetta against Bishop Jakes, which began in 2008, shortly after Duane Youngblood pled guilty to child molestation, according to an acquaintance of Richard's. And that's what I said. When I looked up that affidavit, it looks like it was somebody under a post who said he knew him. But we don't even know if he really know him, because it's no name. Richard mentioned that Jakes has known his family so long, and that a man of his caliber could have easily spoken up in defense for Duane and maybe aided for his case. And so this is what the lawyer put in his affidavit. He wanted Bishop to know how it felt to be falsely accused of the same thing his brother was. Richard was determined to get retribution for his family and the pain of such allegations that caused him. So this is what I'm going to, about the Richard situation. I'm going to show y'all something. Because a couple people sent this to me a while ago. This is literally on Google. Richard Youngblood has had a blog since April of 2006. April of 2006. Y'all picking up what I'm putting down? April of 2006, he's had this blog. June 16th of 2006. So this would be even 2 years before this 2008 this man is talking about. And then also Jakes alleges that, and we'll get in his affidavit. But in this, he says it's called Mega Fest is a mega mess. As a Christian who lives in the Atlanta area, I am absolutely appalled at the nerve of TD Jakes and those who are involved with this year's Mega Fest event. I believe that God is also fed up with his name being used when he is not the foundation, focus, or part of what is going on. There is an arrogant spirit at the root of this event. It would be wonderful if 200,000 people gathered to flood the streets of Atlanta and win souls for the kingdom. This is not the focus of this event. Bishop Jakes has surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men who care nothing about holiness or the fact that he is living a blatant lie. It is obvious to anyone who has even a little discernment that he is a homo. Now, this in 2006. We can now no longer sit quietly by and allow this spirit to take over our churches. I'm asking every believer who is fed up with this man being the poster boy that the world has chosen as our voice to meet me at this year's mega mess and lift our voices against this ungodly gathering. If we do nothing, there will be a new level of spiritual warfare in this city, Atlanta. Beware of this man and the spirit in which he operates. It is not of God. I will soon be releasing a book on my personal knowledge of this man and his tactics to kill God's plan by establishing his own. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. Let us unite in the fight. So then I clicked on, I said, well, what else did he say in this little blog? Now, this is an old blog, okay? Its title is Bishop Jake Steele. You guys see that. And what he does is he says, I don't want to read all of this. Lord have mercy. Let me see what we can go down to. I have had, oh Lord. Bishop Jakes has started climbing the ladder and preaching circles around the tri-state area and seeing, oh, let me see the date of this. This is July 31st of 2008. Okay, he says, Bishop Jakes has done a wonderful job flying under the radar concerning what he really represents, but the time has come for the hype to be exposed and the truth to be told. There are many people who know the truth concerning this man and his ministry, but are too afraid to speak because there is an automatic assumption that because something is popular, God is in it. Let me be very clear. Bishop Jakes is not who many believe him to be. All of the mighty speeches and mesmerizing phrases are not what they appear to be. Bishop Jakes and his kind are spoken of in the word of God. Jude verse 4 talks about men who crept in. The word crept is the past tense of the word creep. In other words, Bishop Jakes is a creep. I don't mean it to be funny, nor is it intended to be offensive, but it is true. Let me explain. I have known Jakes for quite some time. I met him before the world embraced him as the next Billy Graham or before he had made his many millions of dollars. I met him when he was Elder Thomas Jakes. At first, I was equally mesmerized by his ability to preach revelatory words that seems easy for him but difficult for others to see in the word of God. A lot of this stuff sounds like what he said in his affidavit. He shared with me how he was an avid Bible reader and told me the way he read was the reason he could see what others did not. He would share many things with me that seemed to be a help in my ministry. Eventually, I became his armor bearer. This allowed me to see ministry from a completely different angle. I saw backroom deals that I never knew happened, as well as backdoor deals that were a total shock. More on that later. Jakes has started climbing the ladder and preaching circles around the tri-state area and seemed to just have doors open before him without much effort. He would tell me of stories of other preachers and their involvement in scandal after scandal, always remarking that it was shameful and that he was supportive of the leaders who were under demonic attack. I would later find out that he was supportive because he was exactly what they were. And y'all see the word a homo is what he's saying. He said further down, while Bishop Jakes was not successful in his attempt to have X with me, he did everything he could to try to convince me. After seeing that I would not fall for his tactic, he said something to me that this day still reverberates in my ear. Some quote, sometimes too much light hurts the eyes. At first, I had no idea what he meant, then later understood that he was saying to me that he had revealed too much of himself to me. Duh. What an understatement from such an articulate man. This is where my personal warfare began. Questions began to surface in my head like, what kind of sign was I giving off that made him think he could approach me? Then the warfare took on a feeling that I felt a need to prove my manhood. I began to have X with as many women as would allow me to satisfy my lust to prove my manhood, all the while protecting his too much light. The saddest part to this warfare is that because of the information that I had, Bishop was afraid that I would use it against him, so he began to forecast me as a troublemaker and a liar. All of the mutual friends that we have received phone calls and were told not to invite me to speak at their events, obviously because of his reputation, he was believed and I was not. He even sowed seed in my home between my wife and I by telling her that I was no longer welcome to the church, but that she could continue coming. That marriage eventually ended in divorce. It took me a while to stop having dreams of going to his church and testifying, smile, give honor to God, then nail him. I did not because even under that pressure, I feel God and didn't want to hurt his people. I sought counsel and found that I was in a cesspool of homosexuality, but all on the down low. They were all married and appeared happy. Once I found out how bad the was, I turned in my license and stopped going to church. I cried out to God for help. I can feel the anointing right now. One thing that I thank God for is that even when you are nobody to everybody, you are somebody to him. So I ain't about to read all this, but I'm just saying. So this is Duane. You guys can listen. This is Duane's blog. I googled. People sent it to me a while ago, but I was just trying to see if Richard was gonna come out and if he did an affidavit, if it was gonna match this blog. So sounds like what he's saying. And again, this blog was in 06. So that's what it sounded like, Chris J. He was out here spreading it low and spreading it wide. That's what he said. I worked at Mega Mess. I was a supervisor at Phillips Arena. Did you? Were you actually at the Mega Fest? Because I don't know. Did he show up to the Mega? Like, did they come with signs or something? Like, what did they do talking about a Mega Mess? So. You said I remember when everyone had a blog Nas podcast. Yeah, and the thing is this. Their attorneys pulled up a blog where apparently let me see where his affidavit is. Apparently in this blog, somebody in the comments said that it's all that Richard is mad because he wouldn't testify. He wouldn't say anything nice about his brother at his hearing or say he didn't do it. So now he's going to make up stuff about him. But the thing about that is this is 2006 and he got other posts under there as well. So the timelines ain't what you saying. Then Jakes is going to say in his affidavit, let's pull up what he has to say, because I was just looking at everybody's timelines, because that's what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. Let me see if I can find Jake's affidavit. So Jakes basically said, I have reviewed the affidavits of Duane Youngblood and Richard Youngblood submitted in support of the motions to dismiss. The statements in these affidavits purports to describe situations where I harbored carnal desires for these men. These statements are knowingly and flagrantly false. I am repulsed by these defamatory accusations and the $6 million extortion letter I received from Duane Youngblood's attorney, Tyrone Blackburn. For years, I have been counseled to ignore the constant stream of low-level smear against my reputation. However, the emotional and physical toll of this coordinated campaign of lies designed to damage my reputation and legacy has become overwhelming. The pain it has caused my wife of 43 years and my 5 children, when I have always loved, nurtured, and provided for, is simply too much to bear. Every person has a breaking point. I have reached mine. I authorized this lawsuit because I can no longer remain silent. My calling to preach the gospel began at a young age. In 1980, I founded Greater Emmanuel Temple of Faith, a small storefront church in Smithers, West Virginia. We just had that photo up. With a congregation of just 10 people. I traveled to coal mining towns throughout the state, spreading the gospel. This was a true testament to humble beginnings. In 1982, I married my wife, Sarita. I embraced her 2 children from a previous relationship as my own. Tragically, just 6 months into our marriage, a near fatal car crash left Sarita with debilitating injuries, confining her to a wheelchair for nearly a year. That same year, I lost my job at the Union Carbide chemical plant due to its closure, further compounding our already difficult financial situation. To feed my family, I worked nights digging ditches for gas lines with my brother, but even this arduous labor was often insufficient. It is within this context, the reality of my life in 1986, that Duane Youngblood makes his preposterous claim nearly 40 years later on the Larry Live podcast that I promised him lifelong financial support in exchange for X whenever I visited Pittsburgh. This assertion is not only ludicrous, it is a bald-faced lie. To be clear, while I occasionally travel to Pennsylvania around 86 to preach at area churches that were part of the Greater Emmanuel International Fellowship Network. I never tried to corner, grab, or kiss any teenager. I never phoned Duane Youngblood to proposition him for X in exchange for financial support. And I never groomed, actually abused, actually assaulted, and engaged in predatory conduct of any actual nature toward Duane Youngblood. I never apologized to Youngblood for any such conduct because it did not happen. During that period, I was barely keeping my own family out of poverty. I was not the Bishop T.D. Jakes y'all know today. I was a pastor with no substantial following and no financial resources. My home was a small wood frame structure. He attached a picture of his house too. My home was small. There was no signs of prosperity. My life was consumed with providing for my family, often amidst severe hardship. There were numerous nights when my wife and children returned to a home without water or electricity. I often shared the story of how I turned the shame of utility shutoffs into a game with my two oldest sons, then just 5 and 6 years old, seeing who could reach their rooms without stubbing their toes in the dark. My circumstance began to improve in 92. I managed to scrape together enough money to travel to Tulsa, Oklahoma for the Azusa 92 Evangelical Conference. Initially, I was largely ignored. However, my fate changed on the second day when I was introduced to prominent evangelist Carlton Pearson by Sarah Jordan Powell. His support led to a speaking engagement at the following year's conference, Azusa 93. There, my sermon, Woman, Thou Art Loose, resonated powerfully with attendees and launched me into national prominence. Before this pivotal moment, my ministry was a modest local calling. Today, I have diversified my income streams as an author, film producer, real estate developer, and more. However, during the time period referenced by Duane Youngblood, I had none of this. He said I was broke. I had nothing. In my 68 years, my only involvement with the justice system has been primarily through the Texas Offender Reentry Initiative, a faith-based program that helps firmly incarcerated individuals reintegrate into society. They've assisted 40,000 individuals through that program. I now find myself defending my character and integrity against two convicted felons acting at the behest of an overzealous blogger attempting to extort $6 million from me. Duane Youngblood claims to have confronted me about the alleged attempted kiss, yet I had never heard a whisper of this supposed incident until his appearance on Larry Live. So he said he never heard of this. Although Duane blames this conjured up incident as an excuse for his abhorrent behavior, it is my understanding that he never brought any of this up as a defense in either trial that resulted in him spending half of his life in prison. I nor anyone he is now maligning was brought up in either trial. Make that make sense. Oh, he said that loud. Make that make sense. He said he should have brought all these bishops up and stuff when he was doing his sentencing. If this event truly occurred and it was traumatic, as he claims, why was it never surfaced by any of Duane's own molestation cases, where such a detail would have been paramount to his defense? It is with deep sadness that I find myself responding to these egregious and defamatory claims. My willingness to address them does not diminish the need for justice. I am one of many who have been targeted by these malicious individuals. My commitment extends beyond defending myself. It includes exposing these individuals and their tactics, which often prey on those who lack the resources to defend themselves against such calculated attacks disguised as truth telling. So he's saying he's standing up for the greater good by filing this lawsuit, because there are other people that may go through this that can't afford it like him. I must add, the inconsistency in Duane Youngblood's narrative are too numerous to address comprehensively. His story changes with every telling. Initially, he claimed I tried to kiss him. In a separate interview, he stated I blocked him from leaving, which is completely out of character for me. His latest claim is that he was driving me home after a birthday party. Duane Youngblood has also implicated two other pastors, accusing one of groping him during a massage. Yet he has made no demands against that individual. He accuses me of merely trying to hug and kiss him, yet seeks to extract $6 million. Why this discrepancy? If I am as reprehensible as he portrays me, why did he join the organization where I served as a vice bishop, leave, and then subsequently rejoin? Regarding Richard Youngblood, this is what made me look it up to see, like, did Richard Youngblood talk about this before? I was like, let me go look at these articles that people sent me, or this blog people sent me. Because when he talks about Youngblood, he says, while I frequently traveled to Pittsburgh during this period, Richard and I, as two adult men, were perfectly capable of making the 4-hour trip from Charleston, West Virginia, without requiring overnight stay at a motel. So he's saying they ain't stay overnight at no motel at all. You could just make the trip. That's it. I categorically deny ever getting into bed naked and propositioning Richard. Furthermore, if he genuinely believed me to be a threat, why did he later approach me approximately 10 years ago? So that would be, we in 25, so maybe about 2015. He's saying that Youngblood approached him 10 years ago in Nashville at TBN about a job at the Potter's House. His story surfaced only after I declined to hire him due to his lack of qualification. So according to Jakes, he's making this up because he refused to hire him 10 years ago. But as we see, he's been talking about Jakes and kind of been dragging Jakes at least since 2006 when he started this blog. So that's not accurate to say that that's the reason why 10 years ago because of a job. So that's what made me look at it like, oh, okay. And then he said, Richard has a history of instability. He hasn't been able to maintain a job. He has multiple children with different women and a felony conviction for failure to pay child support. When I tell you they were backgrounding on everybody, they know all your business. They know when your past due light bill. They know your mortgage company. They were like, he has a felony conviction for failure to pay child support. It is difficult to respect a man who doesn't take care of his children. In all my years, I have never initiated a lawsuit against anyone. We filed this lawsuit against individuals who are supposed to be men of God, but are clearly not. Well, it's only against one person. All the rest are those. But he said, we filed this lawsuit against individuals with an S who were supposed to be men of God, but are clearly not. The catalyst for this action was not simply the nature of the accusations, but the relentless attacks by the overzealous blogger. So he admits, like, the catalyst was not just because he felt like Duane didn't tell the truth, but because he wanted to get Larry, who is the overzealous blogger. I have faced many attacks in my life, but none like this. Even so, I feel compelled to stand up against these bullies. So he said that Youngblood and Larry and them are bullies. This is carefully orchestrated attempt to destroy me. An overzealous blogger publicly solicited individuals to make accusations against me, not for victims to come forward, but for anyone willing to fabricate stories. He explicitly stated his strategy in one of his podcasts before his interviews with Duane. So they looked at some of the old videos with Larry, and they're alleging in one of those videos, he doesn't cite it, but they're alleging that he says, once it's filed, I can talk about it on my show. Like, the claim doesn't have to be true. And then it's something in between it because they put 3 dots. So this isn't the full statement. But they decided to quote, the claim doesn't have to be true. It just needs to be filed. Once it's filed, I can talk about it on my show. So it's a lot of dots in between. So I don't know what the context is of this video, and they didn't give us a link so we can look at it to see what exactly it says. Richard and Duane Youngblood responded to the call. They are working in concert, relentlessly targeting me and my family with vicious, unfounded attacks. I spent the past year enduring these vicious attacks, lies, rumors of my wife leaving, rumors of my church abandoning me, and so much more. I didn't hear the rumors that his wife was leaving him. They said Sarita was leaving him. I never heard that. All of this was happening while I found myself helping my wife recover from knee replacement surgery and while helping my brother navigate kidney failure. This unwarranted stress brought me to a place of having a health crisis on stage in front of my entire congregation. As a guy who had no previous health challenges, this near-death experience was a turning point for me. Enough is enough. I suspect a larger network is involved in this scheme. So he thinks it's a bigger network, all anticipating a share of this attempted money grab. Duane's ambition and confidence in extorting $6 million from me are evident in his preemptive actions, establishing a website, commissioning artwork, hiring a publicist, and announcing the launch date for not one, but two books, a tell-all about me, and another entitled How to Get Rich. All of this was in motion before I even received the $6 million extortion letter from Blackburn. Blackburn has stated that he is not being paid by Duane. If this is true, the question must be asked, who is funding Blackburn's efforts? The only logical explanation is that he fully expected me to succumb to the pressure of his false accusations and pay him $6 million to remain silent. Or, Jakes, this is another reason. Another reason could be that he felt like he could get this case dismissed, and if he gets it dismissed or get any of the claims dismissed, he can get an attorney fee. Because people do take cases knowing, because I know when I did family law, if there was a stay-at-home wife and I knew the husband worked full-time, I would take the wife who didn't have the money to afford me, because I knew that because she was a stay-at wife, they were going to make the husband pay my attorney fee. So I didn't get paid till the end. So when you have a chance of getting attorney fees if you prevail, then that's another reason why some attorneys might take a case without getting paid. Finally, Duane, an overzealous blogger, had already publicized this fabricated story. Why would I pay them not to tell something they had already broadcast to the world? This tactic aligns with Tyrone Blackburn's established pattern of behavior. So he going after the attorney. It's like he want the court to like look at Tyrone Blackburn funny. But he already done showed everybody he's in good standing. So it might not like him, but he's in good standing. This entire smear campaign began shortly after the public announcement of a commitment from Wells Fargo of up to $1 billion for community redevelopment. This initiative is designed to provide quality, affordable, and workforce housing, broadband access for children lacking adequate internet service, fresh grocery options and food, desserts, job creation and training, and comprehensive support services for undeserved and undercapitalized community. This partnership was never intended for my personal gain. It is a testament to my commitment to giving back to the community that has supported me for decades. So are you saying that they're not, that Wells Fargo, did they snatch this back or something because of these allegations? Is that what you're alleging? Because otherwise, I don't understand why this is in here either. In summary, I have no ulterior motive. I desire peace, accountability, and an end to this harassment. I pray for an expeditious resolution to this matter, one that respects the integrity of the federal court process and allows me to continue the work that is most dear to my heart, investing in the lives of those most in need. My deepest concern is that others will be victimized by their vicious, collaborative tactics. Unless the law intervenes, this pattern of abuse will continue. That is from Bishop T.D. Jakes. So what do you guys think? Huh? What y'all think about that's Jake's affidavit? The only problem I have with Tyrone Blackburn is that he's known for filing his cases in the wrong courts or jurisdiction. Yes, that is the issue that allegedly happened in it was a judge in the Southern District of New York where there were allegations that he files the cases in the Southern District of New York in order, because that's a busy court and a lot of high profile, like we got all of the Diddy stuff is there. Russell Simmons, like all of the celebrities are there. So they're making it seem like he files them in that jurisdiction, even though he should not, because he knows that you can download those and people pay attention to the Southern District docket. Allegedly, there was a request that it go to the grievance committee. I haven't seen anything that he was ever grieved because of it in the Southern District, and he attached that he was in good standing in order to pro hoc in, and this judge has allowed him to pro hoc in. So that's that. You said that was a lot. It's too much. All these affidavits are like giving a whole lot. All of them are. They're giving life stories and books and Tyler Perry soliloquies. So You said it's a scheme that Todd set up. Old man Johnson said, now he lying. Sarita ain't never leaving. I think they said it was a rumor out here or something, I guess is what he's saying. I don't know. I hadn't heard that. He's giving too much information. TD Jake's family's a mess. That's one for always forever. Maybe he meant 10 years from the he did. That's what I'm saying, Theodore. What I'm saying is he said in 2016, he's saying that Richard basically has made this up because he's pissed off. They're trying to do a timeline that Richard is making this up because he's pissed off at Jakes. He has a vendetta. So, and 10 years ago, what he alleged was that, which would be 2015, 14-ish, he's alleging that he made this story up about him because he was upset with him for not giving him a job because he wasn't qualified at the Potter's house. Well, the blog shows he's been talking about Jakes long before that. So that's not gonna, to me, that doesn't line up. Then the same thing with apparently the attorney found a blog where Youngblood told his story, or somebody was Richard told the story. Something happened where Richard was talking about, I guess, Jakes, and somebody in the bottom of the blog said, the only reason why you've done this, I guess, is to get back at Jakes because you're mad that he didn't stand up for your brother when he was getting sentenced. He could have supported his brother and gave some type of character letters or references or whatever. And he doesn't say who the person is. Apparently it's attached to some blog because he did an affidavit. Did he put, let me see if he actually put that blog on there. Let me see. But the attorney did reference it. He got so many attachments. It's like a lot of attachments. He got an expert. Whoever downloaded Larry's video, they did an expert for it. Had them say that it was what it purports to be. Let me see this. I gotta go through all of these and see. That's the church. It's a lot. It's literally like 30 something exhibits, I believe. Oh, do y'all want to see this alleged extortion letter that they keep talking about? Did y'all see this extortion letter? This alleged extortion letter? Let's pull that up real quick. And then I'll get back to finding what I'm trying to find. So this is the alleged extortion. 37. What number is this? 37. So this is the alleged extortion letter. So he says, it's appearance letter, preservation notice, and offer of settlement. It's basically a demand letter. Bishop Jakes, my firm has been retained by Duane Youngblood regarding harm visited upon him by Bishop Thomas Dexter Jakes. The nature of Mr. Youngblood's concerns, unwanted sexual assault and harassment. This letter is intentionally void of the graphic details. The purpose of this letter is to encourage the parties to resolve this matter quickly and privately. And he got in bold for settlement purposes only. The opening settlement demand is $6 million. The demand is negotiable. So he put it in bold. Mr. Youngblood first learned of and was introduced to the respondent as a young teenager. Mr. Youngblood was raised in the church, and his family often visited Bishop Wade Jones' church. Throughout Mr. Youngblood's teenage years, respondent often visited Bishop Jones' church. During one of those visits, the respondent began actually assaulting and or harassing Mr. Youngblood. Upon information and belief, Mr. Youngblood was between ages of 17 and 19. As respondent's career took off, Mr. Youngblood's interaction with him decreased over time. Mr. Youngblood was forced to interact with the respondent with the encouragement and urging of Dr. Sherman S. Watkins. Mr. Youngblood obliged, and he confronted respondent about the harm respondent visited upon him. Respondent said, quote, at that time, my stock was rising and I would have slept with anyone, end quote. After this distasteful confession, Mr. Youngblood was forced to interact with respondents throughout the years due to their membership in the same organization. In conclusion, Mr. Youngblood has authorized my office to make a pre-litigation settlement demand for $6 million. This settlement will provide Mr. Youngblood with the necessary resources to help him pay for the psychological services he needs, as well as compensate him for the physical trauma his teenage body endured. This demand is negotiable. You have 7 days from the date of this letter to accept this offer of private resolution. If we do not hear from you by November 23rd, we will view your silence as a rejection of this offer and proceed to file suit without delay. Although we hope this matter will be resolved privately, we must provide you with a preservation notice. And he just got all the preservation stuff that, if you have any information, documents, don't get rid of them. Don't be deleting emails. Don't be deleting video stuff. You have to preserve it. And that's it. That is the infamous letter. Extortion letter. Sherry said that's a typical demand for settlement letter. These law firms be submitting to a top auto insurance company I work for to get folks BI coverage. That might be me, Sherry, because I be giving those insurance companies demand letters too. You might come across me a few times. And so that's what they're saying is Theodore, this is serious. This is a serious matter. Talking about all Jakes need to do is yell, woman, thou art loose. Empath VB said Larry was talking about Manasseh Jordan when he said he would only talk about Jakes if paperwork was filed. Okay. Do you know where that's at? Because I want to know. I want to hear the clip. Because that's what I'm saying. The fact that they put ... lets me know that there was part of the conversation. You put that. I mean, I know you guys know grammar, but you put that whenever you're omitting something out of that sentence. So. Tabitha said it really seems like YB saw these civil suits going on while he was locked up and then jumped on a $6 million bandwagon. Are you talking about like with Diddy? Negotiable is not a shakedown. That's all I'm saying, Fuller of Faith. If that's the case, we'll all be hitting. His was less aggressive than mine because mine, like I said, they're longer. I usually do exhibits. He said, I'm not going to put the details in there, baby. I'm putting line by line. And oftentimes I have my complaint already drafted and I just attach the complaint. So you can read it for yourself what's about to get filed. So, and it's just the way it's to avoid litigation. Like you don't want to litigate everything. Then depending on your clients, a lot of times your clients don't really want to deal with litigation at all. You get older clients. I have some that's in their 70s. They're not trying to sit for depositions. They're not trying to sit for a lot of this stuff. So they don't. So. He said, that you be telling them they get $50. That's how I feel too. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but yeah. Y'all adjusters are a trip, Sherry. That's all I gotta say. My favorite people to cross-examine of all time are adjusters that act like it's their money. I'm like, do you think this coming out your bank account? You know that's the company money, right? Sherry, you know that's the company's money. That's not your money. Y'all be holding on to them coins like it's gonna affect your bottom line. They not gonna give you your raise next year or something. This looks really bad for TD Jakes. He shouldn't have done this. That's from Andrea. We ain't got to the reply yet. Can individuals send a demand letter or does it have to come from an attorney to not be considered extortion? That's from Kalundra Brown. I have absolutely no clue. I just know that is general practice for civil attorneys, for civil litigators. And well, I'm going to use an example of something I just read in the Ernest Williams case. That's the ex-husband of Shirley Strawberry, for those of you that don't know. And when she wanted to, this alleged victim of Ernest Williams said that Ernest took her motorcycle and they told her she needed to do a demand to get her stuff back before I guess they would even pursue the case. So I guess it depends on what demand you're making. I don't know, but as an attorney, it's practice. It's definitely practice that we do all the time. And Larry saw a video that Manasseh had of Jay. Oh, I get what you're saying. Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know nothing about that. That's why they trying to subpoena him. Sure. You're saying too much about what you got. Allegedly. So then, okay, did I finish that? Did I finish that motion? So basically, you see, I wanted to make sure that what Jake said was that we talked about that. Which one is this? So let me see. So we read his entire situation. So, they say it's all facts fabricated, so it's malice. And that he doesn't have to, because he's saying it's defamation per se, he doesn't have to prove damages because he's alleging defamation per se. He's saying the conspiracy claim. So this is the conspiracy. He says the conspiracy claims withstand scrutiny too. A civil conspiracy requires a combination of two or more persons acting with the common purpose to do an unlawful act or to do a lawful act by unlawful means for an unlawful purpose. So they agree with that. They agree with the prongs here, okay? So they say first, to satisfy the first prong, this is what Jakes is alleging, Youngblood and at least the YouTuber acted jointly to develop and launch the October 28th show that specifically aimed a public attack on Bishop Jakes that falsely claimed he tried to groom and actually abuse Youngblood. So that's what they say in the agreement is. Second, they said a YouTuber in joint action with Youngblood buttressed the false claims by stating that Bishop Jakes had fixers called to stop LRL from airing more episodes about Youngblood's story and that those efforts validated Youngblood's claim. So they're saying when Larry said that, alleged that there were fixers that called and tried to get him, I guess, to stop the interview from Jake's camp, they're alleging that he said that in order to validate Youngblood's claims that he has against Jakes. He adopted that statement. Third, the YouTuber and Youngblood elected in concert to further the common purpose by launching a second show. So, and then that the YouTuber asked questions to elicit certain comments out of Youngblood. Then finally, the primary objective for the scheme was to get money from Bishop Jakes and to harm his reputation. So that's what they're saying is the conspiracy. And then they go on to say public policy does not favor letting fraudsters lie and exploit others. And then there was a request from Youngblood to add additional claims against Jermaine Jakes, I guess, for his threats and all of that. And they're trying to go through why the court doesn't have jurisdiction over Jermaine Jakes just because he made a simple, put a simple message in an inbox that doesn't give the court jurisdiction over him. So that's what they're arguing. So that was pretty much the gist of their thing. Any questions thus far? Because we're almost at the home stretch here. This will happen when I get behind. We're at the home stretch. Went over the extortion letter, the alleged extortion demand. Because we need to do, let's see, the reply. Okay, so I'm going to pull the reply up. So this is the final document that was filed that will be considered by the court. And based on that, the court will make its decision on whether they're going to deny the claim, deny the motion, grant the motion, grant it in part, deny it in part. We'll see that after the court considers all of this, but there are no more responses after this. This is the final reply. And Let's see. But let's go. In the reply brief, there was an affidavit that was filed by a former youth pastor for the Potter's House. Okay. This is a very, very long story here. So I'm going to start out with that. So, Tim Anderson, he said, I am providing this sworn affidavit to present my knowledge regarding the claims raised by Duane Youngblood concerning Bishop T.D. Jakes. This document is based on my direct observations, experiences, and any relevant facts within my knowledge. So he talks about his personal interactions with Duane Youngblood concerning Jakes. Sometime during 1996, I was at a conference hosted by T.D. Jakes, and while staying at a hotel, Duane Youngblood approached me trying to find a room. The hotels were pretty much sold out. I had a room with 2 beds and told him he could stay with me. We were already acquainted by Higher Ground, Always Abounding organization. I was just asked by Bishop Jakes to relocate to Dallas, Texas to be his youth pastor. I had been the national youth evangelist for the organization for about 3 to 4 years, and during this tenure, preached for Duane Youngblood a few times at his church in Pennsylvania. So when he mentioned about not having a room, I didn't hesitate to offer him the extra bed to sleep in during the conference. During the first night after the conference, we retired back to the hotel and room and had conversations about ministry and our future in the organization. I remember Duane sharing with me about encounters he had with Bishop Jakes. So he's saying this was in 96 when he was the youth pastor. He said, I remember Duane sharing with me about encounters he had with Jakes and how Jakes had forced himself into his brother Richard Youngblood, whom I had not yet met. He later mentioned the same encounter that he recounted on the Larry Live show on YouTube, telling me how Jakes had tried to kiss him as well and asked me if I had any of those encounters. I told him at that time I had not, but I had suspicions because of the encounters I had with other bishops in Higher Ground, Always Abounding Assemblies organization. He warned me to be very careful and said, quote, they would love to get a hold of you. I thought Duane Youngblood was fishing for information, and I had just found favor with the man of God, T.D. Jakes, whom I saw as the greatest preacher in the world. So I kept quiet and listened. I would later find out through my own experience exactly what he meant. So this is someone that is saying he was told about this in 96. You know what? Good evening, Deborah. Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, that reply from Blackburn, those affidavits are doggone bad. The TGX is probably going to have one of those Mitch McConnell freezing spells. You know what? So this is from his former youth pastor. And this was, I guess, when he first left West Virginia. He's going to give his whole story, and it's very, very long. Okay, so pull up a chair. He did the whole attachment like he didn't had this ready, and he had this mug ready to cut and paste from somewhere, because this couldn't have been nothing that he just made up for this. So he got early struggles and survival. Now this is Tim Anderson. I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and like so many others, my early life was filled with challenges I couldn't control. I was given up for adoption at the age of 6 months, placed in foster care, and eventually adopted by the time I was 4 years old. My adopted mother was an educator, and she worked alongside her biological daughter to provide for our family. Life seemed to be on the up and up until my mother's health began to deteriorate when I was around the age of 10. That's when everything began to change. Unable to care for me due to her illness, my adopted mother placed me in a boys' ranch where I spent the next 8 years drifting in and out of foster homes and group homes. During this tumultuous time, I found myself living with people I met on the streets. Survival became a daily battle and my instincts took over. I often found myself stealing from stores just to have food to eat. Those days blurred into one another, marked by desperation and fear. Living on the streets. The harshness of that life quickly shaped me. I ended up in and out of juvenile institutions, and my once clean record became to build a rap sheet of offenses. What started as petty theft soon escalated to breaking and entering, and even robbery. Survival wasn't just about getting by, it was about staying alive in a world that seemed bent on pushing me to the edge. I remember some nights lying down in gas station bathrooms, cold and alone, with nothing but the sound of passing cars and the occasional flickering light to keep me company. I had to rely on myself to make it through, and that meant doing whatever it took to survive, even if it meant turning to drugs. I find myself selling drugs for a local kingpin just to make enough money to eat or find shelter for the night. These affidavits, I need to teach people how to do affidavits, because this is just like, this is story time. In those moments, I wasn't just a teenager fighting for survival. I was someone who had been broken down piece by a system that had abandoned me at every turn. The world around me felt like it had nothing left to offer, and yet I pushed on, always just one step ahead of everything that threatened to swallow me whole. Let me go on to the ministry, okay? So if you want to read his background, I could post that in the membership. Embracing a call, a new life in ministry. After that unforgettable night at the revival, everything in my life shifted. Okay, maybe he did talk about him over here. Let me see. Anyway. After that unforgettable night at the revival, everything in my life shifted. I couldn't deny the clarity I felt, the sense that God had specifically ordained this path for me. The laying on hands by Bishop T.D. Jakes and the prophetic word he spoke ignited something within me. I was no longer the man I had been before, caught in the cycle of crime, desperation, and uncertainty. I had been chosen for a purpose, a calling greater than myself. I wonder if he wrote a book, because this sounds like book passages. The dream I had in prison had come alive in a way that was undeniable. The words, "Don't run ahead of me, stay behind me," echoed in my heart, reminding me that this journey wasn't about my timing, but about God's. I couldn't rush ahead or try to force things. I had to stay humble, obedient, and trust that God would open the doors when the time was right. As soon as I left that revival, I was on fire. I dove deeper into the scriptures, spending hours reading and studying the word of God. I knew that if I was to step into ministry, I needed to be prepared, not just spiritually, but in knowledge. I began to seek out opportunities to serve in any way I could, whether it was leading a prayer group, helping organize church events, or volunteering in outreach programs. I was there, eager to learn and give back. The next few years were all about foundation. I wasn't rushing to be in the spotlight, but I was determined to build my character and understanding. Ministry wasn't just about preaching, it was about living out the gospel, walking in humility, and serving others in every possible way. I looked up to men like Bishop Jakes, who were walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and I wanted to follow their example. The church became my home, and the people there became family. I found strength in the support of my pastor, Bishop Sherman Watkins, who has stood by me from the beginning, and in the wisdom of other leaders who helped guide me along the way. They were there to remind me that this was a marathon, not a sprint, that I needed to continue staying close to God and allowing Him to shape me for the work ahead. Facing new challenges, ministry and personal growth. Chapter 5. As I became more involved in ministry, new challenges arose. There were times when doubt crept in and I questioned whether I was truly equipped for the calling God had placed on my life. My past, though forgiven, still lingered as a reminder of who I had been. I wonder if I was qualified, if I truly had the ability to lead others to Christ when I had once walked such a broken and damaged road myself. Okay, I'm about to skip that. Okay. Life dedicated to ministry. Chapter 6, stepping into leadership. Years passed, and with time, the church and its members began to recognize the gifts and callings I had. I started stepping into more leadership roles, leading Bible studies, preaching at services, and eventually taking on more responsibility within the church. Each time I stood before the congregation, I was reminded of that dream, the table of abundance and evangelist I had seen. I realized that the feast in the valley wasn't just a metaphor for my life, it was a symbol of the harvest, the souls I was meant to reach. The evangelists at the table were not just people from the past, they represented the calling I had to be a part of a larger movement to bring people into the kingdom of God. And Bishop Jakes, who had prophesied over me, was still a guiding figure in my life. His words still ringing in my ear, quote, "Don't run ahead of me, stay behind me." I knew now that my ministry wasn't about me at all. It was about God's will and his timing. It was about building his kingdom, not my own reputation. Every sermon, every prayer, every outreach event was a chance to fulfill the calling that had been placed on my life. Okay. He saw fruits of his journey. After a while, he was impacting people. A call to serve, reflection and moving forward, a surprising challenge. Okay, let's go with a surprising challenge, navigating difficult situations, chapter 15. I have been invited to speak at a church in the organization, and it seemed like any other event. However, during my visit, the bishop who had invited me made a comment that stopped me in my tracks. He said, quote, "I didn't bring you here for my daughter, whom you've become friends with, but I brought you here for me." Ah, what you mean? What does that even mean? Huh? That's what I would have said. That would have been my response. What? What does that even mean, Bishop? So he's saying this was the first navigating difficult situations. He said, I knew exactly what he meant. His words carried a weight that I couldn't ignore. I was shocked, confused, and deeply uncomfortable. I had respected this man, but now I was faced with something I never expected to encounter in ministry. My initial reaction was to take offense, to accuse him of making an inappropriate pass, but I quickly realized that doing so could lead to consequences that could damage not only my reputation, but also the reputation of the ministry and the church as a whole. I knew that if I confronted him directly, he could easily turn it around and say he was referring to the church or ministry, not to me personally. The ambiguity of the statement left me in a dilemma. It was a moment that required me to discern how to respond in grace, wisdom, and integrity without reacting out of hurt or anger. So he says in that moment, he chose to stay quiet and walk away from the situation, trusting that God would give him strength to navigate the complexities of ministry. This was an opportunity for him to learn how to handle difficult situations without compromising his character or his calling. Okay, let's see. A deeper understanding of ministry. As I continued in my role as National Youth Evangelist, the lessons I learned from this experience stayed with me. I began to understand that ministry was not about popularity or recognition, it was about serving God and his people with a pure heart. The incident also deepened my relationship with God. I had to rely on him more than ever for wisdom, strength, and discernment. I spent more time in prayer asking him to guide my steps and to help me navigate the complexities of leadership. Facing challenges. As I continued in ministry, my experience began to take a more troubling turn. Every bishop I preached for seemed to have their own struggles with boundaries, and I became disheartened by the recurring pattern. Many approached me either directly or indirectly in ways that made me uncomfortable. While I had not yet experienced physical assault, the constant sexual overtures were a reality I couldn't ignore. At first, I tried to dismiss these incidents. After all, I was young, newly ordained minister, traveling and preaching in environments where authority figures often blurred the lines between leadership and personal interest. But the repeated encounters began to weigh on me. The disillusionment grew. I started to question everything. The gift of God had given me, my calling, and whether it was all just a setup. Was this ministry I was called to, or was it a way to groom me for something darker, more predatory? An offer from Bishop Jakes. Y'all hit that like button, all this reading I'm doing. As you said, this is a Tyler Perry situation going on here. And yes, this is in the court document. He attached this story with this affidavit as a part of the affidavit, I guess, so he didn't have to like rewrite it. This was just attached to the affidavit. So now we got all the background. It sounds like bishops have been trying to proposition him, and they never actually assaulted him, but they were basically making inappropriate comments. And one bishop allegedly said, I didn't bring you here for my daughter, I brought you here for me. And he said it was just never ending, and he felt like, is this like a place, is this really ministry, or is this a place to groom people? So let's go on. This is what he has to say about Jakes that is pertinent, I guess, to this lawsuit. Amidst this spiritual turmoil, an opportunity came that seemed too good to pass up. Bishop T.D. Jakes, a name known across the world for his powerful preaching and ministry, invited me to his new home in West Virginia. He had a vision for a new ministry and offered me a position to come to Dallas and serve alongside him, something that could elevate my calling in ways I hadn't imagined. His offer was appealing, but I wrestled with questions. Why would he offer me such a low salary, when I was already making a decent living as an evangelist? Why such a drastic change from the work I was doing? He explained that ministry and evangelism were different worlds. Being a pastor required a different level of commitment, and I would have to start small, learning the ropes. He offered me $24,000, which is about a third of what I have been making. See, I would have told him, hell no. You want me to move across the country and you paying me $24,000? But I'm sure he looked at it as an opportunity because of how big Jakes was starting to become. But he also told me that I could supplement my income with selective engagements outside of his ministry, things that wouldn't interfere with my regular duties. It seemed like a fair trade, but I was uncertain. Still, who at my age, coming from my background, wouldn't want to serve under someone like Jakes? So I agreed, but there was no written contract, only a verbal agreement that felt uncertain, and I wasn't sure that what I was walking into. I told Bishop Watkins, my pastor, about the offer, and he gave me his blessings, although with caution. He told me, quote, all that glitters isn't gold, but that he felt I had reached a point where moving on was like going to college, an opportunity for growth. The disheartening moments, a tipping point in my faith. I arrived in Dallas, eager to work alongside Bishop Jakes and excited about the future. However, my first encounter with him in his new mansion, when I was tasked with assembling furniture, set the tone for a new kind of discomfort. While I had hoped to discuss ministry with him, to learn from him as a mentor, something unexpected happened. At one point, he went into his bathroom, and when he returned, he passed by me naked. Ew. Pat said, I know the judge, man. They have to read all this unnecessary information as if they are in trial. This is a lot. They do. Everybody is just like trying to belabor and get their points across, and some of this stuff just is not relevant. It's not clear and concise enough. But I don't think we needed his background, but I think I see both sides. Typically, you don't need anybody's background, but we know that what Jakes Camp would do based on their pattern and practice, what they have done in the responses, they probably would dig up this man's back. If he was a youth pastor for Jakes, that means Jakes probably knows about his past. Jakes knows about his criminal history. And so I think maybe he was trying to get ahead of it by giving background and context, because he knows it's going to be presented eventually, or even in oral arguments, because he can't reply to this unless he gets some type of permission from the court. Maybe in oral argument, he'll say, oh, and this Tim Anderson, he look at his rap sheet. He got a rap sheet from here to Texas himself. You know what I'm saying? So perhaps he felt like he was compelled to give the background, because when you don't do that, they got these investigators going behind the scene trying to find all about your life. So maybe that's why. But typically when you do affidavits, it's numbered how Jake's did theirs. They're great writers over there. I have to give the attorneys their props. They're great writers. I don't necessarily agree with their arguments per se. In certain aspects I do, but in certain aspects I don't agree. They're great writers over there, and they doing their affidavits like I'm accustomed to. I'm not saying it's the only way, but I'm just saying usually you have one thought in each paragraph for the most part, and it's very easy for the court to read. These are stories like out of a book. That's what it's looking like. It's like Tyler Perry can literally take all of these affidavits and create something on Netflix that will probably be number one. So, but let's go on. So he said he went and walked past them naked. Like, what's up? I was stunned. I turned away, trying to downplay the situation in my mind. This was Bishop Jakes. After all, this opportunity was a dream come true, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. I didn't want to make things awkward. I didn't want to be seen as a homophobic or judgmental. I told myself that I couldn't let a single uncomfortable moment ruin the chance to learn from one of the greatest preachers of my generation. But as time passed, more situations like this came up. One incident stands out in particular. I had accepted an invitation to preach in Japan, and I was excited about the opportunity. However, when I shared this with Bishop Jakes, instead of congratulating me, he told me that I could not go. He said it would interfere with my duties at the Potter's house. I reminded him of our earlier conversation where he said I could supplement my income through engagements that didn't interfere with my responsibilities. But he insisted that I had to choose between staying as his youth pastor or going back to evangelizing. He told me, don't forget, I made you. I opened doors for you. I was torn. I didn't know what to do. Here was my mentor, someone who had given me a platform, and yet I felt trapped. I didn't want to dishonor him, but I also didn't want to lose my independence and the opportunity to continue doing what God had called me to do. The pressure was immense, and I was once again confronted with a difficult decision: stay loyal to my calling under his leadership, or step back and reevaluate what I truly wanted in ministry and life. And so, chapter 55, a struggle between calling and integrity. You know, I'm just making these chapters up, right? As I continued in my ministry, the challenges seemed to multiply. I wrestled with the tension between fulfilling my calling and maintaining my integrity. These situations with Bishop Jakes, though deeply uncomfortable, were reflective of a broader struggle in the church and in the world. It wasn't just about preaching or ministry anymore. It was about staying true to who I was, what I believed in, what God had called me to be, no matter how difficult or confusing the journey became. Each decision I made, each step I took was a test of my faith, my values, and my commitment to God's purpose for my life. While I was grateful for the opportunities, I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. And so I had to choose. I had to decide whether I would allow these challenges to define my ministry, or if I would rise above them and continue moving forward, trusting that God had a plan for me beyond the struggles I faced. So all the highlights basically that they had in here is what I guess he wants the courts to read. But when I read just the highlight, I didn't really understand the full context, that it was about the whole Japan trip that caused this whole fracture in him being the youth pastor, according to him. The struggle, spiritual manipulation, and the breaking point. As you can imagine, I was emotionally and spiritually crushed by the weight of everything I was experiencing. The manipulative power to play that had been unfolding before me was all too familiar. It wasn't just a matter of disagreeing on ministry or decisions. This felt like a calculated move to control me, to exert power over my life in ways that were both subtle and overt. I felt trapped, alone, and utterly devastated. The man I had looked up to, the leader I thought I could trust, I had crossed the line I never imagined he would. I began to cry. I knew from my past experiences that had caused so much pain, that this wasn't just a decision about ministry or a job. It was about power, control, and manipulation. The more I thought about it, the more I broke down emotionally. I paced his office, trying to make sense of everything, trying to breathe through the overwhelming sadness. As I walked back and forth, trying to process what was happening, Bishop Jake stood up, grabbed a box of tissue, and walked toward me. His words were cold, calculated. It sounds like you have a decision to make. So I guess he was upset about him having to like give up the Potter's house or go do evangelism so he can go to Japan. And then, in a move that left me paralyzed with confusion, he grabbed me and tried to kiss me. My mind was racing, emotionally distraught. I pushed him away and tried to regain some control over my emotions. I sat back down, hoping that if I cried more, he might feel compassion and perhaps his intentions would shift. But it was clear that the power dynamic had shifted in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. He sat down on the other side of the table, a distance between us now, but the emotional damage had been done. The tissues were placed in front of me like a symbol of my brokenness, and I told him how much I loved him, how difficult this decision was for me. I was trying to hold on to whatever shred of dignity I had left, but his response was chilling. He reminded me again that it was his ministry, his leadership, and that if he gave me what I wanted, my chance to go to Japan, then I couldn't understand the principles of authority, like the ultimatum and the strain on my faith. In that moment, I felt the full weight of the decision he had placed in front of me. I knew that if I didn't choose what he wanted, if I didn't stay and submit to his will, I would lose my place in his ministry and potentially any chance at the future I thought I had. But I also knew that I had to make the right decision for my soul, for my calling, and for the integrity I have fought so hard to maintain. I asked for 2 weeks to pray about my ultimatum, knowing that I couldn't make a decision in that moment. So he prayed about it. So stepping away from darkness. After agonizing over the situation, I made the difficult decision to return to evangelism. I had to look beyond the control, beyond the manipulation, and trust that God had a plan for me that was not tied to the person or the position that I had believed was my future. When I told Bishop Jakes of my decision, he responded in his usual way, preaching a message that seemed tailored to hit me subliminally. His message was bloom where you're planted. That was his message. It was powerful, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more about him than about my own personal growth. It was a great message in many ways, but I couldn't ignore the stark contrast between the spiritual gifts I had witnessed and the manipulative behavior I had experienced. It was a struggle I couldn't shake. I knew that I had to make the decision to leave behind what had become a toxic environment, one that blurred the lines between ministry and personal boundaries. That is from Tim Anderson, who was the former youth pastor over there at the Potter's house. What do you guys have to say about that? Stay tuned for book 2. This is literally, you said what type of supplements they take because their memory is impeccable. This had to come. This has to be something that was written before. I just can't see. I mean, I know we got AI who does a lot of writing for you now if you just give them what to say. But and I do believe there are certain memories that you probably don't forget. I'm sure he remembers why he left. Why he left the Potter's house if he was there all that time. Is this why? You know what? I'm not doing this, Andrew. Cherie said, wow, a quick Google search showed Watkins stepped down as bishop recently for allegations against him too. He is also a father figure, birds of a feather. Somebody said it wasn't true. So after his name was brought up, there were rumors that he stepped down that Sunday after that interview with Youngblood. But somebody came in the chat. I think I was over on Thais's platform. Somebody came in the chat and said that that was not true, that he didn't step down. So I don't know. I don't know any of these people. I'm just reporting what's being filed. This is all alleged. All right. This is all alleged. This is what Tim Anderson is saying. So Tim Anderson is not a relative, because I know some people were talking about Richard Youngblood being a relative. Tim Anderson is saying that he basically was told about some things in 96-ish. So that would be way before any of these other dates that's being pushed out there by Jakes and everyone else. The blog shows about, because someone asked in the beginning, like, what are the dates? Can we show like when they started telling the story? So according to this, Youngblood had been telling the story, and he told it in the 90s allegedly. According to the blog, looks like Richard had been telling his story as well, at least as early as 2006. And Youngblood allegedly, I guess, told him about his brother's story in 96. So I guess we could assume for those purposes that if Youngblood's telling the story in 96, then Richard must have told him at least back then as well, allegedly. So that's that. Rhodey said he didn't step down. Yeah, somebody told me it wasn't true, so I'm not sure. You said the judge ain't reading all of this. Well, the judge has plenty of people working for him or her, so they don't have to read it if they don't want to anyway. So that is the big part in the reply that nobody was expecting, because we was like, oh, it's somebody else trying to say that they almost got kissed too. So this is the reply. Defendant's reply to the response. And you can't do too much in the reply. So he basically does an introduction. Plaintiff T.D. Jakes' opposition to defendant Duane Youngblood's anti-slap is meritless, relying on legal mischaracterizations and factual distortions to salvage a lawsuit designed to suppress free speech. Defendant's motion brought under the anti-slap is legally and factually justified, as the statute protects public discourse on significant matters of public concern, including allegations of misconduct by clergymen and religious institutions. This lawsuit is a textbook slap, a retaliatory effort to punish defendant for sharing personal experiences and insights into institutional abuse. Pennsylvania's anti-slap law exists precisely to prevent such misuse of the judicial system. Furthermore, plaintiff erroneously disputes this court's jurisdiction over Jermaine Jakes, so that was another issue, despite his clear and intentional efforts to threaten and to intimidate defendant in Pennsylvania. The law is clear. Anyone who directs harm into a state is subject to its jurisdiction. For these reasons, defendant respectfully requests that count 1 grant his anti-slap motion to dismiss plaintiff's complaint with prejudice. Count 2, award attorney fees and costs as mandated by Pennsylvania law. And count 3, grant defendant's request to file a cross complaint against T.D. Jakes and Jermaine Jakes for their coordinated efforts to intimidate, silence, and retaliate against defendant. So he want to do a cross complaint is what he's saying. He going to do a counter complaint, and he wants to add Jakes, and he wants to add his son. So then he talks about the Pennsylvania anti-slap. We talked about that ad nauseum. If you didn't hear it, then go to the beginning, because I talked about that and how the law applied and all of that. So we're not going over that right now. Okay. So then he has the plaintiff fails to establish a prima facie case for defamation. Under Pennsylvania state law, a plaintiff establishes defamation claim by proving the defamatory character of the communication, publication of the communication by the defendant, application to the plaintiff, the recipient's understanding of its defamatory meaning, the understanding by the recipient of its intended to be applied to the plaintiff, special harm results to the plaintiff from the publication, and the defendant lacked the conditional privilege to make the statement. Moreover, based upon The constitutional protections for freedom of speech, a public figure bears an additional burden of proof. Plaintiff must prove that the statement was false and that the statement was made with actual malice. Actual malice means knowledge that the statement was false, reckless disregard of whether it was false or not. Okay. A defamatory statement which imputes a criminal offense, loathsome disease, business misconduct, or serious sexual misconduct constitutes defamation per se. So then he goes on to basically say the statements again that we already went over, so I ain't going over that again. So they say, as an initial matter, none of these statements satisfy the requirement for defamation per se, because they're saying it was a kiss, basically, or attempted kiss. Therefore, the plaintiff's actions, even those actions that occur. So then it says, further, plaintiff, as so artfully articulated throughout this litigation, is a public figure. Therefore, the plaintiff's actions, even those actions that occur away from the White House, the church, the Grammy Awards, book signings, and his family, are public concern. Instead of proving that Youngblood's statements were false, plaintiff merely conducted background checks in hopes of swaying the court to weigh against Mr. Youngblood's credibility. Plaintiff further alleges that pictures of his rundown church and home are proof that he was incapable of making promises that he couldn't keep. This does not satisfy his burden. At most, it proves that the plaintiff believes that the public persona and words should be enough in the court of law. This does not prove that the claims are false. So then he goes on to say the plaintiff fails to demonstrate actual malice. Additionally, the plaintiff has failed to prove, I'm going to need some spacing right here, some bold, some spacing. It looks like two different fonts. Like we're going to have to work on that. Additionally, the plaintiff has failed to prove and cannot prove that Mr. Youngblood's statements were made with malice because they were not. The question of whether the evidence in the record in a defamation case is sufficient to support a finding of malice is a question of law. Clear and convincing evidence is the highest burden in our civil law and requires that the fact finder be able to come to clear, convincing, without hesitancy of the truth of the precise fact at issue. Failure to investigate without more will not support a finding of actual malice, nor will ill will or desire to increase profit. The plaintiff speculates with no evidence that Mr. Youngblood made these allegations in an effort to transform himself from an ex-offender into an inspiration. Then he goes further and alleges that Mr. Youngblood dispatched a lawyer to demand $6 million from Bishop Jakes. In hopes of bolstering its weak position, the plaintiff adds an alleged vendetta by Mr. Youngblood's brother, Richard Youngblood. Based on these allegations, the plaintiff claims that Youngblood has substantial motive to make up stories about Bishop Jakes. Unproven ill will coupled with unproven attempted exposure to boost future business opportunity does not satisfy the plaintiff's burden. Moreover, the communication of a denial by a plaintiff does not usually constitute evidence of actual malice. The defendant has failed to prove a valid claim of defamation, and count one of plaintiff's complaints should be dismissed. Then he says plaintiff fails to show falsity, a necessary element for defamation. Under Pennsylvania law, public figure plaintiff in a defamation case must prove falsity by clear and convincing evidence. Okay. The plaintiff provides no counter. Wait a minute. Here, plaintiff fails to demonstrate that defendant's statements were false. Defendant's statements were based on firsthand experiences and testimony, public reports, and allegations made by other individuals, and corroborated evidence from witnesses who supported defendant's assertion. The plaintiff provides no counter evidence proving falsity. Instead, plaintiff relies solely on broad denials and general statements of harm. However, denials alone do not constitute proof of falsity. And then he has Tucker v. Philadelphia Daily News holding that plaintiff must do more than merely deny the allegation. They must prove falsity. Furthermore, the law is clear. Where speech addresses matter of public concern, the burden falls on the plaintiff to establish that the statement at issue were false. Because plaintiff has failed to carry his burden, his defamation claim must be dismissed. Then he has plaintiff fails to show special harm. So let's go to the conspiracy claim. So this is the response on the conspiracy. We almost finished, y'all. It's been 2.5 hours. Hit the like button, okay? Under Pennsylvania law, a civil conspiracy requires one, an agreement between two or more people to commit an off. We done read that 10,000. We know what it means, okay? We know what you got to prove for conspiracy. Additionally, proof of malice and intent to injure is essential. Hold on one second. I'm hearing noises I'm not supposed to hear. All right. All right. Additionally, proof of malice and intent to injure is essential. A professional motive negates malice, defeating a conspiracy claim. Plaintiff alleges that Youngblood and others conspired to spread false claims about Bishop Jakes through a widely viewed podcast, asserting that these individuals coordinated to harm Jakes' reputation. However, plaintiff fails to provide any verifiable evidence of an agreement or a meeting of the minds, relying instead on speculative allegations. Appearing on a podcast is not evidence of a conspiracy. Plaintiff's argument suggests that any public discussion of personal experiences could be labeled a conspiracy, which is legally unsound. The Larry Reid live interview merely provided Youngblood a platform to discuss his personal experiences, and there is no evidence of coordination or fabrication. Plaintiff further argues that a YouTuber's reference to Bishop Jakes having fixers intervened somehow confirms the conspiracy. However, this claim is unsupported and speculative. By plaintiff's logic, even Jermaine Jakes' contact with Youngblood, where he allegedly urged him not to appear on LRL, could be interpreted as validating Youngblood's claims, demonstrating the illogical nature of plaintiff's argument. Moreover, plaintiff claims that Youngblood acted with malice to extract money and damage Jake's reputation. However, plaintiff's own assertion suggests that Youngblood's actions were professionally motivated to rebuild his reputation and launch new business endeavors, which negates malice under Pennsylvania law. Since plaintiff fails to establish the fundamental elements of conspiracy, this claim must be dismissed. So then he goes on to say why the court has jurisdiction over Jermaine, because apparently he really is trying to file something against Jakes and Jermaine when this is over with. And then he says he's entitled to attorney fees, pursuant to the anti-SLAPP. They allow you to get attorney fees. And that's it. That's pretty much the reply. What do you guys think about the reply? Yes, I talked about that earlier, Yolanda, that the cussing pastor has gone away to be with glory, gone to glory. Now I know why lawyers get paid the big bucks. That's from Dennis Menace. Quander, the other pastor mentioned who is deceased, was the mentor to TD Jakes. That's from B Woke. I don't know who that is. I don't know. I believe both stories, too much detail. That's from For Always Forever. Yeah, they said he's still pastoring, but there was allegations that were made about, I guess, Bishop Watkins, and all of this is under, I guess, his organization. You have to watch the whole interview. Like I said, it was very minimal information about Jakes. It was like 10 minutes. It wasn't that long. And then he may have elaborated, I think, on part two, but yeah, he talked about his experience, his alleged experience just with various pastors, and he did bring up other names, which Jakes essentially brought up in his affidavit. Like, well, why am I the only one got the demand? Why he ain't send a demand on all these other jokers he was talking about? But Youngblood said the reason why, I guess, the whole situation happened with Jakes and sending the demand is because he alleges that Jermaine Jakes tried to threaten him when Jermaine Jakes told him that this ain't what he want to do on doing the part two, like he shouldn't come. So Jermaine Jakes did an affidavit too. And in his affidavit, Jermaine Jakes basically said he wasn't trying to threaten him. He was trying to warn him. He has not talked to Youngblood in years, but he wanted to warn him on Larry Reid because he said Larry Reid basically he didn't want to come on the platform, but yet and still he didn't warn him till after he did the video. he alleges, though, he never watched the video. That's what Jermaine was saying. So let me see here. Let me see if I can find Jermaine Jakes before we get off here. I don't have a voice now already anyway, so we might as well go on all the way. Okay, here goes Jermaine Jakes. Let's throw him up here. Before we get off of here. Ooh. Remind me not to go so long without talking about stuff where I ain't got to be on for 3 hours. But I still enjoy you guys. I really do. So Jermaine Jakes said, T.D. Jakes is my father. I am his second eldest child. I live in Dallas, Texas. I write this affidavit in support of my father's lawsuit against Duane Youngblood and those with whom Duane coordinated to smear my father in the podcast, and they titled the podcast. On the afternoon of November 3rd, 2024, I was looking at my social media feed and I noticed an advertisement promoted by Larry Reid Live show and podcast for an interview with Duane Youngblood labeled, quote, "The abused becomes the abuser." I was immediately concerned that Duane Youngblood might be putting himself in harm's way unknowingly by involving himself with Larry Reid. Based on my personal experience, Larry Reid's podcast creates controversy that can be very destructive to people's lives. Certainly, such has been my experience with Reid's podcast targeting and attacking my father over a period of years. That is the context in which on November 3rd, 2024, I sent a message to Duane Youngblood. It was a cautionary warning to someone I know, Duane, to avoid Larry because my experience is that Larry Reid distorts facts and is not truthful. I had not talked to or seen Duane in over 30 years. However, I know Duane from growing up in West Virginia. Our families were part of the same church community, and Duane's brother, Richard, was my youth minister. When I sent the message to Duane, I had not seen the podcast. So I did not know what had been stated or that my father was the focus of the discussion. So he's saying in his affidavit when he threatened, Duane said it was a threat. He's saying that it wasn't a threat. But when he said this ain't what you want to do or whatever he said, he's saying I was just trying to warn this man who my family who my father is smearing all through this lawsuit as being trash. I was just trying to warn him, the one I hadn't seen in 30 years, that he shouldn't get on the podcast with Larry Reid. So that's what he's saying. It wasn't a threat. He was looking out for him because he was concerned because Larry has been talking bad about his dad for years and has been spreading, I guess, talking about his dad for years. So that's his affidavit on the reasoning why he sent Duane Youngblood that post. That and the post, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's in another video. It was in a letter that Duane sent. Let me see if I can find that. And then for real, I'm getting off of here in real life because my throat hurt now. Let me see. If I can find it. I think it was in his letter to the court. Let me see. Let's see. So that's the inbox he's talking about. It says it has question marks on it. Okay, that's the first one. It says you might be in dangerous territory, Duane. Just be careful. So he's saying he was trying to warn him about Larry Reid. He wasn't trying to warn him about talking about his daddy because he hadn't even seen the video of the podcast, even though I think it had already aired. But he didn't send this until I believe after the podcast aired. But he's saying that he hadn't watched it when he sent this. That's what Jermaine Jakes is saying. So that's it. So that's his. So basically, it sounds like Duane is trying to add Jermaine. If they continue, they want to add him in there somehow. Like his stepfather, he has an adverse perspective of what his intentions was. That's from Dennis the Menace. How everybody can interpret it differently, I guess. Again, all these people are maintaining that it happened. Jakes is saying it ain't true. He's standing by his position and he ain't did nothing wrong. He has not had no carnal ways towards these guys. So you know what? Y'all got any questions? Because we getting out of here. Y'all done rocked with me for 3 hours. I done did this like a part-time job with you guys. And for that, I am grateful for you guys hanging in there and rocking with me. Thank you so much, Brandon and April, for the cash apps. I appreciate that. That was so kind of you. Because I know it was a lot of information. It's a lot of information that we went over. You said at the end of the day, this what ain't gonna amount to nothing. You know the crazy part is we gonna just chit chat for a few minutes. The crazy part is we have been talking about this since the lawsuit was filed in like November. Just this past week, we started seeing it on some of the bigger. You're not gonna see it on the Shade Room because they only do nice. They only write positive things about Jake, so they're not gonna bring anything like negative. But that I've seen, I could be wrong. But I ain't never seen nothing negative about him ever. But it's, they do things like his health crisis. Like they talk about Jakes, but they don't talk about everything that has to do with Jakes. They're very selective. But I seen like the neighborhood talk. I think Tasha K. It's been a lot of, and it seemed random because it was like we've been talking about this since the case was filed. And now the situation with now they're coupling it like it's Duane and Richard, almost like both of them got sued or something. So people are putting it together. So it'll be interesting to see if this affidavit with Tim Anderson, if that starts gaining attention and momentum and they start putting that in the blogs as well. So you need this once a week, J81. And the crazy part is I did a pretty long deposition this morning. It was pretty lengthy. I ate, I took a little nap, and I was like, I'm going live today because if I wait one more day, they're going to turn around and have a whole order, and I'm not going to be able to really talk about it because I haven't talked about none of the legalities of what has occurred. So I stood by. So Pam, what is your position based on the law? Based on what I read, this is just my opinion. I always believed the conspiracy claim was a stretch. I never believed they had any type of information that it was actually a agreement and that everybody that because you're basically saying Tyrone Blackburn, who is a licensed attorney, is willing to set his bar card on fire to be in some large he's young. He just started, he's been practicing about 7 years, 6-7 years. So he got plenty of years left, Lord willing. You telling me on this $6 million demand, he about to do a whole conspiracy and risk his license to be a part of a conspiracy? I just don't believe it. We spend too much money in law school. We spend too much time in law school. And we spent a whole lot of time, stress, anxiety, and sacrifice to take the bar. So I just don't see him just being like, oh, for this TD Jakes thing, I'm just going to put my bar card on fire. Like, that's crazy to me. So that just never made sense. Plus, there were really no facts to show a conspiracy, in my opinion. The defamation portion, of course, he's going to say it's not true. And of course, Youngblood is going to say it is true. So that's a credibility issue as to he's saying it's false, but he has the burden to show that it's false because he's a public figure. He's saying it's true. So he has to try to prove that it's actually false. Now, will the court deal with credibility? Probably not when it comes to the capability of whether it's defamatory. what I do think, if that portion gets dismissed, I think it would be because they can't show malice. Because I don't see that there was really malicious intent. They're going digging, trying to find websites and books and whatever to try to show malice. So I think that prong is difficult. But if any claim were to remain, I think it would be the defamation. However, there is a possibility that both could be dismissed. But I think if there's a claim that remains, it would be the defamation part, just because it's a credibility contest. Again, I don't think they showed malice, but the court may see something differently. I was looking at the Milagro case with Meg Thee Stallion. I didn't look at the amended complaint, but I know the original complaint, I didn't think it was that strong. But Florida got different rules. Like, they was pulling up case law that supports that some of the stuff she was saying can be considered defamatory. And at this stage, they said, no, we're not going to dismiss it. So you never know, depending on what jurisdiction it is. So that's it. What else y'all got? That's it. Okay. See, y'all was piling down for a minute. Now people starting to come back in. Just make sure you hit the like button, okay? Because we're at the end of this 3-hour live almost. So hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel, okay? That's what I need you to do for me, because I put in a lot of work on today. We had to talk about the anti-slap. We had to break it down. Okay? So that's it. We went to the whole anti-slap from everyone's pleadings. We went over a few affidavits. Of course, there's a lot of attachments on everybody's. Hopefully, I simplified it and summarized enough where everybody understands. And we'll see what happens. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that Blackburn has put up a great defense for Youngblood, or do you think Jake's got this thing? Jake's was right. He should have went on. I know some people are saying he may not have filed it, but who thinks that he should have filed it? That these statements are considered defamatory, and he needs to stick up for himself, and he needs to protect his brand and his reputation. What do you guys think? You said, "Oh my." Let's discuss. Because I just did it from a legal perspective on the facts that's before me, which is the facts that the judge is going to look at. Now, is she going to read all this stuff? I don't know. I think it's a man. Is he going to read all of this stuff? Them affidavits are like books. You can literally turn them into some movies and some plays or something. We got a I Believe Youngblood right here. The Gold Experience that I Believe Youngblood too. Okay, Breezy said, I think there's a little truth on both sides. Okay, she non-biased here. She said, I see a little bit on both sides. J81 said, I think there might be something that happened, but not to the extent that Blackburn alleges. Okay, that's from J80. All right. That's fair. So we mix. Everybody's still mixed up. We just trying to see what happens and see how ultimately what'll happen now is that the court, I'm not sure if they're going to have oral arguments, but if there are, I'm sure that it will be posted if they do. But the judge can just render an opinion and we'll know one way or another. So again, the court can just deny the motion and then you proceed through litigation. The court can say, nope, I'm denying everything. We're going to proceed. Or the court can dismiss one of the counts and grant them on one count and deny on the other one, and they still proceed on the other one. Or the court can grant the entire motion, and then the case will be over, and then they'll be asking for attorney fees. So those are the different scenarios that can happen at this juncture. Any denials of this motion, be it one claim or both claims, mean that the case is going to proceed in litigation. Thomas Apple said, my spirit never allowed me to be pulled into TDJ's preaching. It was for a reason. God gonna put a hurting on this fake pastor. He's gonna wish he never started leading. Oh my goodness, Thomas Apple. The woman he chose said, I believe there's some truth to Youngbloods. Miss HLS said, I'm befuddled. Kelly said, I don't believe Youngblood. I don't believe nothing he talking about. Irene said, I believe it was a shakedown that went wrong. Kitty said, I believe Youngblood. Empath VB said, I believe Youngblood. DD said, I believe Youngblood. Okay, look like Youngblood might be people leaning towards Youngblood. Yeah, the affidavits had a lot of detail, but I mean, usually I understand why Tim Anderson probably did all that because, again, the simple affidavits from the people where all they wanted to do was say, yeah, he told me at breakfast that this happened with Jace. They weren't trying to be extensive affidavits. And then you had the attorneys come back, yeah, but he omitted that he committed crimes, whatever. And it was like, so maybe because of that response, perhaps maybe Tim Anderson felt the need to throw in all the background. Like, y'all could know I was adopted. I was on the streets. I was on the bathroom floor. I was selling drugs. I got a rap sheet from here to wherever. Maybe he felt like he tell on himself and get ahead of himself. Get ahead of it before anybody brings it up. I don't know. But those affidavits were long books. They really were very, very long. I think they should have been a little bit more clear and concise. So that, and the pleadings didn't really refer to them. Like I didn't see in the pleadings where they said see exhibit 5, so it was just a bunch of exhibits that kind of were attached. But the mother of two said, in any case, if I believe there is no truth, I'm fighting. She said, so you think Jake should have fought? She don't care. If she knows there's no truth to it, then she gonna fight. Especially if you had the resources to fight. Pam, did you know Leonardo Johnson got arrested the game last night? I don't know who that is. Who is that? Oh, Leandria. John, you said Leandria. Yes, I heard that Leandria got another public intoxication. She needs some help. Alcoholism addiction is a disease. And this is something it seems like she can't shake. She just had something last month or 2 months ago in South Carolina. And then she's been on the Yanla. She went off on how I found out who Leandria was. I kind of knew who she was from when she went on that show, but she went on live on Facebook and she was cussing folk out. Man, I can't remember what. It was like an award show or something. She was supposed to sing and she was going off on order, talking about how fake they were. And she was drinking. She would go on live and be drinking and stuff back, a while ago. So yeah, she has some help. I hope she has some problems. I hope she gets the help that she needs. Irene said, I believe Tim Anderson about just as much as I want to believe the Timu ain't gonna send me a polyester dress. The lies. That's from Irene. She's out. I'm sure she is. She keeps getting, how do you keep getting public intoxication? Like, what are you doing? Like, you must be outside wilding if they getting you for public intoxication. But I hope she goes, hopefully she'll check herself into rehab. It doesn't help you till you want to do it. See, a lot of times what happens is when this happens and you get arrested, then they might order you to go to Alcoholic Anonymous or something. And I think there's a difference when you know inside that you have a problem and you go get help for yourself on your own volition. I think it's different. Like when judges order people in domestic violence to go to anger management, they do what they need to do to get off paper. Do you really feel like you need help and that you're going to apply this to your life? A lot of times they don't. They don't apply it to their life. So until she knows she has a problem and she goes try, because she's probably a person you can't be around drinks. You can't have friends around you that's drinking, because I can have a drink in December and don't have one till May. You know, like if you're not to that point where you can have a drink and then don't drink again for months because it just doesn't matter to you whether you drink or not, then it's not you don't need to have a drink. Like you're always, they make it like you're always recovering. So she just can't be around it at all. She can't be in spaces and places that has it. She got to watch who she's around. People got to be around her that's willing to tell her no, that's willing to take a couple licks because she probably gonna try to fight you or whatever they do, you know, to care that care about you in order to stop her from doing that. But hopefully she gets the help she needs. I like Leandra. She's very gifted. Alcoholism is a very sad disease. You have to get professional help because you can die trying to do it on your own. It's very sad. Absolutely. I think people don't understand it because it's the same thing as, you know, we don't understand when people become drug addicts. Like we were always told since we had the DARE program when I was little, say no to drugs. So for me, it was so ingrained, I didn't want to touch it. But you get someone, they try it because of whatever trauma in life, they decide to try it, and then they're consistently trying to chase that high. And next thing you know, your body, it becomes a chemical issue. So you become almost where you can't function without it. So you're consistently trying, your body's like reprogrammed. And that's how alcohol is too. And so now you have to get help. And some people don't pay it, they don't have the empathy because they feel like you should have never done it in the first place. And I think that's where the people that are not empathetic towards individuals with the addiction. Addiction is addiction. Some people are addicted to, believe it or not, they're addicted to church. Addiction is addiction. There's a lot of people that are addicted to certain things. Some people are addicted to watching nasty videos like what Kurt Franklin talked about. You know, some people have addictive personalities. She may have an addictive personality, so you can't just be an occasional drinker. So at this point, you have a problem. So hopefully, like I said, she gets the help she needs. Yeah, Kelly said, I hate that what drugs do to people. Addiction is so serious. Yeah. And we've all had times in life where you wanted to pick up a glass or you wanted to do something to numb the pain. And a lot of people, they just want to numb the pain. They have such internal hurt. They just want to numb the pain. And so we have to have some type of empathy for these type of people and pray for them, because this is a battle that they can't do on their own. They just can't. In the 80s, we had alcohol and AIDS epidemic, and we were scared. I pray she gets the help she needs as well, Alice. All right, y'all. Make sure you hit the like button. We done hit our little 3 hours. Thank you guys that rocked with me the whole time, and some of you guys that came in and out. I appreciate it. As always, thank you for all of the cash apps, and I think we have some new memberships that were gifted. Thank you again for that and all of your support. We'll be back with whatever breaking legal news that comes. Until then, I'll let you next time.